state ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
Defense ready to proceed?
We are, Your Honor. Thank you.
Yes, Your Honor.
Teaman, you may call your next witness.
Your Honor, State of Ohio would call Patricia Kraft.
Ma'am, will you please raise your right hand for me, please? Ma'am, do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Ma'am, please have a seat. Now, ma'am, we do have media in the courtroom today. Do you object to your image being filmed or photographed during your testimony?
Yes.
You do?
Your Honor, may we approach?
You may. Thank you, Mr. Teaman. You may inquire.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ma'am, again, could you state your name for the record?
Patricia Kraft.
And could you spell your first and last name for the court reporter?
Patriciacraft.
Now, if you would, this is a courtroom that has a lot of echoing, a lot of squeaks and groans, being an old courtroom. If you could you speak up like you're hollering across the room to somebody, all right?
Yes.
Do you have any education?
I have a bachelor's degree with a minor in social work.
Where did you receive your bachelor's degree?
Morehead State University.
Have you had any other kind of training besides your degree training?
Excuse me?
Have you had any other training besides your degree?
I was a foster parent for 10 years.
Where are you currently employed?
Sauter County Children's Services.
If you could, where were you employed prior to Sauter County Children's Services?
Shawnee Family Health Center.
Anywhere else?
Not at that time.
Okay. How long have you been with Children's Services Board?
A year and a half.
So June or July of 2018?
Yes.
And what is your title at Sauter County Children's Services?
Ongoing caseworker.
Now, what does Sauter County Children's Services do?
We get referrals through our referring system, and an investigator or an intake worker will put the information in, and based on that information, it will determine whether it's screened in or screened out. That means if it's screened in, an investigator will go and check the situation out. If it's screened out, then it just don't get nothing done with.
Is Sauter County Children's Services considered a government agency?
Yes.
Okay. Are they under the umbrella of Job and Family Services?
Yes.
All right. And what is their main goal at Sauter County Children's Services?
Reunification with the family.
All right. Is it also designated the Child Protective Services of Sauter County?
Yes, sir.
Now, you've indicated the process, so to speak, of getting referrals and investigating and going from there. Is that something that you also have to go to court for?
Yes.
And what court do you generally go to when there's a removal action?
Juvenile court.
Okay. Sauter County Juvenile Court specifically?
Yes.
So are you familiar with the juvenile court hearing process?
Yes, sir.
Could you explain that hearing process?
The first hearing is a probable cause. At that time, we show the evidence of why the child was removed. Then it will be set for adjudication and a disposition later on.
Okay. Now, sometimes things happen before you can get into court that are of an emergency situation. Is that correct?
Correct.
And sometimes there's an initial one-sided hearing at that point. Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
Okay. And they call that an ex parte hearing?
Ex parte.
Okay. And then from there, they have the probable cause to confirm what happened in the ex parte hearing.
Yes.
After everybody's given notice.
Yes.
Okay. And adjudication is a fancy way of saying the hearing on whether or not there's an issue. Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
And then dispositions like, what do we ultimately want to do with the child?
Yes.
Okay. I'd like to direct your attention to a child by the name of Dylan Groves, and to a certain extent, his brother Daniel Groves Jr. Are you familiar with these children?
Yes.
How are you familiar with the Groves children?
I was the ongoing caseworker.
And what does ongoing caseworker mean?
I do the monthly checks and make sure that they're following what the case plan states. Make sure they're going to the doctor's appointments, drug treatment, parenting class, whatever is put in the case plan.
All right, so prior to you getting involved, there's another personnel at Children's Services that investigates the initial referral? Is
Yes.
that, okay. And who was the investigator in this case?
Lauren Johnson.
All right. What is your understanding of, let me back up. When, specifically with regard to Dylan Groves, how did your agency become aware that there might be an issue?
It was referral. We got a referral through the hospital when Dylan was born.
Okay. And what was the process from there with that regard?
The investigator went to the hospital to check on the child, and then it was then determined that there was no kinship available, and that's when Dylan was placed in foster care.
All right. The children, the parents of Dylan Groves, are they in the courtroom here today?
Yes.
Could you identify them by name for the record?
Daniel Groves and Jessica Groves.
Could you point them out for the court, please?
Daniel's in the sage shirt, and Jessica's in the cream-colored hair with the burgundy shirt, or purple. Yeah.
Identified as the defendants, Daniel Groves and Jessica Groves.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ma'am, now when Children's Services becomes involved in a case, do they maintain records of that case and any activities involved in that case?
Yes.
Are those records kept in the ordinary course of Children's Services business?
It's just SACWIS through the computer system.
Okay. And they're kept in any kind of abuse, neglect, dependency case that comes through the door?
Yes.
All right. Your Honor, may I approach?
You may.
Let the record reflect, I'm handing the witness what has been marked as State's Exhibit 8. During the break, I already went to opposing counsel and have them review.
Counsel, I thought 8 was helping for documents and this should be 9.
Make this okay. We'll make this 16.
16.
All right, I'm handing you what's marked State's Exhibit 16. This is a microphone, so we don't want to slam anything on there. Could you take a look at those records? Ma'am, the records I've put in front of you, what do they appear to be?
They are documentation from each caseworker
Okay, with regard to whom?
to Dylan.
All right. Would you check the back? There might be some in there for Daniel as well.
They are.
All right. And It's going to get a little awkward because there was 2 sets of documentation provided. So I put some tabs there where there might be some overlap of some case plans. So don't remove those tabs yet. The defense counsel's okay with those being there, I assume. Those records appear to be accurate records of Children's Services records with regard to the Groves family.
Yes,
And are you familiar with these records?
yes.
As we go through your testimony, it may be easier for you to be able to refer to those records as we go through, somewhat chronologically. So feel free to utilize those records. I might ask you for some specific dates as well. Okay. All right. You indicated that Children's Services had got involved in the case from a referral from the hospital. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And what hospital was that?
SOMC.
All right. And then you indicated that Ms. Johnson, Lauren Johnson, was the investigator that went to the hospital?
Yes.
And you indicated ultimately that Children's Services removed the child from the parents and took emergency custody. I'd like to go back before that to earlier on at the hospital. The records are there in front of you for reference. Initially, what was the Children's Services plan with regard to Dylan Groves?
There was an activity log on 111 where caseworker Johnson spoke with Mr. Groves and stated that he had not known that Jessica's drugs use until they were coming to SOMC for Dylan to be delivered. Mr. Groves stated that Daniel Jr. and Dylan are his top priority and that he would do what he needed to do in order to keep them safe. Caseworker Johnson did a safety plan with Daniel Groves until lab came back with the results of the drug scheme. Jessica is out of the home and there is no unsupervised contact.
Okay. And I know it's in there, but I'm going to, for the sake of ease of access, of marked States Exhibit 9, Your Honor. It's been showed to the President Counsel. Ma'am, I know this is part of this record, but could you identify this for the court?
That is a safety plan.
Is that the safety plan that you referenced in the Children's Services activity log that was initiated by Lauren Johnson?
Yes.
And if we could, see if you can read it from up here on the board. That's a horrible copy, and I apologize. See if we can make it read it. Okay, ma'am, I don't know if you can read that or not from there. Can you see the case name at the top?
No.
Okay. I'm going to hand it back to you. I'm just going to let you read it. This lighting is not very good. All right. Ma'am, what's the safety plan you have there in front of you? What's the case name at the top?
Jessica Groves.
Okay. And as you have that there, I need you to really explain what's in that safety plan. So could you explain line by line what we're seeing, what you're going to be reading from?
Okay, it says identify the safety threats and serious harm from which the children needs protection. And it states that Jessica's substance abuse was reported.
Okay.
Then it goes to the action steps, and it says describe the activities necessary to protect the children. And it says Jessica must get a drug and alcohol assessment and sign a release form for us to get copies of everything that she went.
Okay. Let's see if we have it in here. Is it in here?
The second action step would be Jessica is not to be left unsupervised with either child until further notice.
Okay, so the first step was that she wasn't going to live there,
Yes,
and then the second step was that she was going to not be left unsupervised with either child.
yes. Then it says who will be responsible for the activities, and Daniel Groves would be the one responsible.
Okay. And on that, are there signatures at the bottom?
Yes,
Okay. So let me back up. So we've got who will be responsible for the activities. That's on there. And then there's explain how each activity will control the occurrence of serious harm.
the children will be protected.
Okay. And that the person responsible for that was to be Daniel.
Yes.
Okay. And how will the activities be monitored?
Home visit, and it was to be done weekly, and it was to be done by her, Lauren Johnson.
Okay. And then at the bottom, what do we have here, the signatures wise?
The first one is Daniel Groves, the second one is Jessica Groves, and the caseworker's signature.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. You can put that back in that folder. So at this point, initially there is not going to be a removal, but there is a safety plan for this child with his father.
Correct.
All right. And that involved weekly contact, drug treatment for mom, and supervised visits, but she had to remain outside the home unless supervised for visits.
Right.
Okay. What was the understanding of Children's Services with regard to Dad's employment at that time?
At that time, he informed that he had 6 months leave at Rural King.
Okay. And if you would, we're going to look at the activity log report starting, I believe, with January 11th. Are you there?
Yes.
Okay. And this activity log report, is this part of the Children's Services record you have in front of you?
Yes.
The business records, Children's Services. Who did this January 11th activity log report? Let me back up. What is an activity log report?
Activity log is what we do as a caseworker, like when we go out and meet the family, what we discuss, what they discuss, and if they need any assistance of everything. We also check for the safety and the basic needs of the children.
Okay. So at the very beginning of a case, whoever from Children's Services is there is going to start logging their activities on the case.
Yes.
Okay. So in this case, we have a log from January 11th of 2019, correct?
Yes.
What's it entitled?
It entitles Ms. Johnson speaking to the nursing staff.
Okay. What is the subject of this? Well, why don't you go ahead and, if there are no objections, read that activity log report.
Yeah, if you want to lay that up there on that plastic and then lean forward, that might help the court reporter get a good recording. We're picking up your voice.
Caseworker Johnson met with SOMC nursing staff on 1/11/19 and asked for them to explain what unconfirmed meant. SOMC nursing staff explained that unconfirmed meant positive, but they are waiting for lab work to make sure that the test is conclusive. Caseworker Johnson met and spoke with Jessica Groves, and she stated that she realized she was pregnant in October when she felt the baby moving. Jessica stated that she has used heroin for about 6 months and continued to use until she found out she was pregnant because she did not want her nor the baby to withdraw. Jessica,
to use after she found out, she continued to use after she found out she was pregnant, correct?
yes.
Okay.
Jessica stated that she has not used in the home around her son or husband and stated that her husband, Daniel, did not know of her drug use until the evening she delivered Dylan.
Okay. And does it go on from there on the next page?
Yes. Caseworker Johnson spoke with Daniel Groves as he stated that he had not known of Jessica's drug use until they were coming to SOMC for Dylan to be delivered. Daniel stated that Daniel Jr. and Dylan are his top priority and that he would do what he needs to in order to keep them safe. Caseworker Johnson did a safety plan with Daniel Groves until the lab work came back with the results of the drug screen. Jessica is out of the house and there is no unsupervised contact.
Now, did Daniel, according to this note, was there any logging of information that the reason there was no prenatal care was because she was continually high?
There's no documentation to that.
All right. And then, so in this period of time, we're talking about January 11th. Dylan was born January 10th, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So this is still in the first few days at the hospital. There was indicia in the next note of a drug test or a drug screen for Daniel. Do you see that note? Kind of right in the middle of the page there, face to face.
1/13 of 2019.
Okay. And what's that say?
It says Caseworker Johnson received a call on this date and time. Caseworker Johnson spoke with social work Kristen Proctor, who stated that Sauter County Children's Service Board needed to take custody of Dylan due to unconfirmed on the drug screens, meaning a positive. Caseworker Johnson explained that unless there was paperwork stating that there were 2 positive screens, Children's Services had nothing to be able to remove Dylan. Caseworker explained that once lab work came back, a decision would be made.
Okay, so at that point, it's documenting there was some kind of misunderstanding between Children's Services and SOMC as to the drug testing. Is that a fair statement?
Correct.
Okay. Now, prior to that, on the page before, you referenced a drug screen for Daniel by the caseworker. Do you recall seeing that? That'd be on page 2 of 89. Well, those page numbers might be different, but that'd be after the January 11th note. There's another note face to face.
The jury, how's Hutch been treating you down there in the jury room? Is he doing all right?
Good babysitter.
Should I keep him on a little longer and
Oh, yeah. At least the rest of the week.
at least the rest of the week?
Equally divided now between obstetrics and gynecology. So I run the gamut from prenatal all the way to death when it comes to women's health.
Okay. And you said you've been doing that how long?
I graduated medical school in 2002. I graduated residency in 2006, and so I've been in practice here since 2006. I was with Dr. Pettit my first year out.
Okay. And if you would give the members of the jury an idea about your educational background, where you went to school. I know you said you graduated in 06.
Yeah, so I started undergrad at University of Cincinnati, and I spent 2.5 years there, and I took a little sabbatical, and I finished up my undergrad at Ohio State University. I went to medical school at Ohio University in Athens, Ohio, and then I did my internship and residency, a combined internship residency in obstetrics and gynecology, a split program between Athens, Ohio, and Portsmouth, Ohio. And as soon as I finished, I stayed here.
Okay. And do you have professional licenses or board certifications?
Yes, so I'm licensed in Ohio, Kentucky, West Virginia, and Florida, and I'm a board certified obstetrician gynecologist through the American Osteopathic Obstetrics Gynecology Board.
Be handy what's being marked as States Exhibit 17 for our identification and records of reflect and showing that's because. Doctor, do you recognize that document?
Yes,
Okay, what is that?
this is my CV.
Okay, and so that just explains all the qualifications we just went over, your employment history, your educational background, your
Yes.
licenses?
Yes.
Okay. Your Honor, at this time, we'd move to have him declared an expert as an OBGYN.
Does either of the defendants wish to question him as to his expertise?
No, Your Honor, no objection.
No, Your Honor, we would so stipulate.
Dr. Adams will be found to be an expert in his field of obstetrics and gynecology. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, what that means is that Dr. Adams will be allowed to offer opinion testimony in his field. Hutchinson, you may continue.
Thank you, Your Honor. Doctor, let me direct your attention to January 2019, specifically January 10th. Did you have an opportunity to assist in the medical care of defendant Jessica Groves? Okay, I'm going to need you to speak up. It's
Sorry. Yes, I did.
okay. Explain to the jury how you became involved.
They called me early in the morning for someone to come to triage. It's our emergency rooms in the obstetrics unit for someone with no prenatal care and active labor, almost complete. And so then I came to the hospital, and that's when I first met her.
Okay, and approximately what time did you arrive?
If I recall the times, I think about 6:54 or something like that. I can't remember the actual numbers. I have to look at the numbers.
Okay, all right. Explain to the jury what your role was there.
I was on call for no prenatal care, walk-in patients for that morning, and for someone who has no prenatal care, I take care of those that walk in that need help. So I showed up and I evaluated
Okay.
the patient.
You said you were on call?
Yes.
So do the OBGYNs rotate that call for
For no prenatal care, we do.
no prenatal care patients?
Yes.
Okay. And what medical history or information did you receive from your nursing staff regarding the defendant and her pregnancy prior to actually treating her?
Just that she had no prenatal care and she was about to deliver a baby to get in here as soon as possible.
Okay. Did you ask any questions directly of this defendant or her husband?
I did.
Okay. Explain to the jury what that was.
Well, When I arrived to triage, she was 9.5 centimeters dilated. And for you that don't know, complete dilation prior to delivery is 10 centimeters dilated, so she was almost ready to deliver. So I made a quick examination of the patient and asked her some questions. At that time, though, she was distant and didn't answer many of my questions.
Okay. If you would explain to the members of the jury why prenatal care is important for a mother to follow through with.
Yeah, so prenatal care, it's the stalwart for us. We can help, actually, prenatal care actually starts with preconception care. So we like to optimize the female's body so that it can be receptive to pregnancy, and also we can identify any risk factors that we might have to take care of during the pregnancy that might optimize the environment in the mother and then optimize the outcome.
Okay. And are there risks in not going to your prenatal care or seeking out prenatal care?
Certainly, it depends on what's in the history that we have to look at. Risk factors such as smoking, high blood pressure, other issues that we need to identify and optimize so we get a good outcome.
Okay. And you said you did ask some questions of her and she did not answer?
Very distant. She was distant. So directly, I can't remember her answering any questions at that time.
Okay. Were there any pain medications or narcotics administered to this defendant?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. Do you know why?
Normally, women get epidurals prior to delivery, but she was so close to delivery, we don't give narcotics that close to delivery because the baby don't have an adverse reaction or have difficulty after a delivery if we give a narcotic that close to delivery.
Okay. What was her demeanor? Did she appear to be in pain like a normal patient would be a dilated
Most
pain?
women, when they're complete, if they have no pain medication on board or no epidural, would be in extreme pain and showing that. Like I said, she was just distant, an odd reaction.
Okay. Did she ask for pain medication?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. About how long were you there before the baby was born?
I think it was just several minutes.
Okay, just several minutes?
Yeah, like 2 to 4 minutes, I believe, once I got there and got her set for delivery and I had a baby.
Okay. And once the baby's born, what do you do?
I deliver a child, I cut and clamp the cord, and then the nursery nurses take over. And then I watch for mom, and I deliver the placenta. I check for tears, for lacerations at delivery. I repair them, and after that, my job is finished, and I normally leave.
Okay. Do you recall having any specific concerns about this patient, given any information you received or the fact that she didn't have any prenatal care?
Well, there's always concerns when there's no prenatal care because you never know what you're going to have. And during the course of that several minutes, it was brought to light that she had had some substance abuse in the last few days. And so that's something we have to take into consideration with the child.
Okay. Doctor, do you see in your practice mothers that have substance abuse issues or that are under the influence?
Certainly.
Okay.
Certainly.
Would you say that she was under the influence as she was there in labor that day?
In my opinion, with her being so distant and acting not like we normally see, I believe she might have been impaired.
Okay. Were you involved any further in the care of defendant Jessica Groves after the delivery?
Yes. So like I said, I left the room. They called me back after her blood pressure had dropped and she started having vaginal bleeding. It's called a rapid response. So if her blood pressure drops and her vital signs go, there's a rapid response team at our hospital. That way we can have all people on board. They did arrive at the floor and called me, and I did come to the floor to evaluate her for her vaginal bleeding.
Okay. And do you know about how long of a time span between delivery of the baby and this issue?
That was at 9:40-ish or so, I believe.
Okay, so hours.
Hours, a couple
Okay.
hours later, yes.
In between that time, were you notified of any problems with the patient?
Not at that time.
Okay. If you would explain to the members of the jury what you did to treat the hemorrhage that she had there.
Yeah, so she had no IV access, so I gave her some medication called Methergin. It's medicine to clamp the uterus down to help stop bleeding. I also examined her bottom and also cleaned out her uterus with, it's called sponge forceps. She had some clots in there. Cleaned that out. We rapidly got the uterus clamped back down, but she did have a significant amount of bleeding.
Okay. And did she recover okay after that?
Certainly. So after we got IV access, actually it was a central line that we had one of our physician assistants from the ICU come down and put in since we couldn't get peripheral IV access. Once we got her stabilized, we moved her to a different floor where we could monitor with an EKG. On maternity, we can't monitor the baby or the mom's heart. So we had to move her to a different floor so we could monitor her. I think she spent the night, we gave her 1 unit of blood because her blood dropped. And I think we stabilized her and she was discharged home after that, the next day.
She was discharged home the next day?
I believe it was the next day.
Okay. Let me back up just a minute and ask you, show you State's Exhibit 18. Sir, if you could identify the documents that I've just handed you.
Yes,
What is that?
that's the newborn identification form.
Okay. And how do you recognize it?
There's a footprint on there, and this is what the nursery does. They perform this once the child's born and put on there.
Okay. And does your signature appear on there?
My name's at the top up top, and the
Okay.
nursery nurses sign that.
Okay. And
It
if-
just-
go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, so my name is at the top, but my signature is not on here. The electronic stamp is on the bottom, but my hand signature is not on there.
Okay. If I could put that up so the jury can see it. If you would, before I take that, because I'm not sure you'll be able to see it when we put it up there, it's not as,
Yes.
the picture's not as good. Tell the members of the jury the baby's weight, length upon delivery.
Yes, sorry. 5 pounds, 10 ounces was the weight, and the length was 19 inches. And it was a male. Anything else you'd like?
Then I'll put it up for them. So is this the same document here on the screen that you just looked over?
Yes,
Okay. And so it identifies the infant's name as Dylan Brooks. Is that correct?
correct.
And so this is just a form that the hospital fills out for every infant that's born there?
Yes,
Okay. And identifies information about the birth,
right,
height, weight, date of birth?
correct.
Okay. I can have just a few minutes. Doctor, just a few more questions. You said the delivery happened within minutes.
Yes,
Is that right? Would you call that an uneventful delivery?
uneventful.
Okay. So no injuries to the baby as a result of birth?
No injuries to the baby.
Okay. Does that occur sometimes?
Do
The
injuries
babies are
occur?
injured while they're being born?
Oh, uninjured? Most of the time, that's the way it happens. That they have no injuries at all with birth.
Okay. But it does occur sometimes?
Occasionally, you do have injuries at birth.
Okay. Baby Dylan did not have any injuries as a result of his birth?
Not at all.
Okay. I think that's all I have at this time.
Ms. Hutchinson, Mr. Stratton, you may cross-examine.
Yes, Your Honor.
Good morning, Dr. Adams.
Good morning, sir.
Just a few questions. You said you asked some questions of Jessica. Do you remember what those questions were?
I'm just trying to get past medical history from her.
Okay, could you give an example of some of those questions?
Yeah, I typically ask, and this is what I ask her, past medical history, past surgical history, any medication she's currently on, or any illicit substances.
And how did you describe her earlier?
Distant.
Distant? Could you explain that a little bit more about what you mean by distant?
Distant, well, in my opinion, she was, lack of terms here, not aloof, not responding to my questions.
Not responding?
Yeah.
Okay. Was she not?
She was alert, but not responding.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask, that if she was alert and able to answer your questions. Did she seem like she was in pain, or?
Not for someone at that stage of labor.
Okay. Dylan, was he delivered early?
Was he delivered early? What?
He wasn't full term, was he?
At the time with no prenatal care, it's hard to tell in that time frame.
Okay, so you're not sure at that time when you were delivering how many weeks he was?
With no prenatal care, there's no way to ascertain that at the time.
Okay. All right. No further questions, John.
Mr. Stratton, Ms. Scott, you may cross-examine the witness.
Thank you. Morning, Dr. Allen.
Good morning.
I believe that you stated that you were approximately in the room a very short period of time, correct? Just minutes, and then
Correct.
you had some after care and follow-up with the mom. Is that correct?
Correct.
Both parents were in the room, or do you recall?
I do recall him being in the room.
Okay, you do recall Mr. Groves being in the room. Did you have any direct conversations with Mr. Groves that you can recall?
I don't recall that.
Okay, so you do not know if he participated in any of the questions, or you probably may not have been directing your questions to him.
I don't recall that.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Any further questions, Ms. Scott?
No further questions. Thank you.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
Is this witness free to go?
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Stratton?
Yes, Your Honor.
Ms. Scott?
Excused.
Doctor, you're free to go. Thank you for your time today. State may call their next witness.
Your Honor, the state would call back to the stand Patricia Kraft.
Hutchins, Patricia Kraft. Ma'am, you were sworn in yesterday, but since this is a new day, I'm going to administer an oath again. Can you raise your right hand? You solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. And please have a seat. Ma'am, I asked you yesterday, do you object, there's media in the courtroom, do you object to your image being filmed or photographed during your testimony?
Yes.
The witness has objected. We'll direct that the camera be lowered and there'll be no photography of her image during her testimony. Teeman, you may continue your direct examination of the witness.
Thank you, ma'am. Just for the record, could you state your name again?
Patricia Kraft.
All right. I'm going to hand you what has been marked State's Exhibit 16. For purposes of reviewing this, if you would, set it right here on the corner of this platform like that. You may have to lean forward, which is okay to review it. And there are some paper clips we'll discuss here later. And I'll direct you where to go from here, okay?
Okay.
All right, ma'am, we've already talked about how this case got started, so we're not going to start from scratch. We're going to pick up where we left off. Let's get this out of the way right now, however. Ma'am, would you agree that whether it was through a safety plan or custody with a case plan, there was all of a decision to place the child into the care of the father?
It was decided that if he could pass the drug screen and was negative, that the child would be placed with him only.
Okay. So, and at this point in time, And if I'm referring to page 2 of 89 from the activity logs that should be in front of you there. On January 11th, do you see that?
Yes.
Okay. That references as one of the records of Children's Services that there was a caseworker or an investigator named Lauren Johnson who did a drug screen on that date. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And on that date, according to the records, Daniel tested negative for any substances.
He was negative.
All right. And that went into part of the whole safety plan that Investigator Johnson was working on at that point.
Correct.
Okay. So, is it fair to say there were some initial understandings from Dad by Children's Services? Was he to have a steady job?
Yes.
Did he, according to Children's Services knowledge at that time, have a steady job?
Yes, he did.
Where did he work?
He stated he worked at Rural King in Waverly.
All right. And was he to be drug-free?
Yes.
Did he indicate to Children's Services he didn't have a problem with drugs?
Yes.
Did he also indicate if there was a difference between or a conflict between his children and his wife, did he indicate who he would side with?
No. His children.
Okay. So that was an understanding too. If something came up, he's going to take the children's side.
Yes.
Did he indicate whether or not he would protect his children from harm?
Yes, he did.
And who made these representations to you or your agency?
Mr. Groves.
By the way, do you know how drug screens were done by Children's Services in January of 2019?
The person comes in, they go to the bathroom. They are told not to flush the toilet or turn on the water.
Does an agent from Children's Services follow them into the restroom?
No, we stand beside the door.
All right. Is the door open or closed?
It's usually cracked. It depends on the worker.
All right. Do you observe the urine come from the person into the cup?
Yes. No. No.
You do not?
We don't observe it. No.
Okay. Now, you've had a chance to review this record, and you were intimately involved in the case as a caseworker, correct?
Correct.
Is it fair to say that Children's Services put some requirements on the dad if he were to receive placement of this child?
Yes.
All right. First, was there an understanding that he would have to work with Children's Services?
Yes.
Was there an understanding that there would be weekly contact with Children's Services?
With the investigator, once it came over to me, it would have been a 7-day follow-up appointment, home visit, then a 4-week, and then monthly after that.
Was there an understanding that if you were to call them and try to get a hold of them, he would have to contact you back?
Yes.
Was there an understanding that mother would receive drug treatment?
Yes.
Was there an understanding that mother could not be in the home except for supervised visits?
Yes.
Was there an understanding that dad would remain employed and not have any drug issues?
Yes.
Was there an understanding that the parents would apply for any public benefits that would be available for the child?
Yes.
What kind of public benefits would they need to apply for?
They would apply for food stamps, but we would keep the medical card because he would be in our custody.
Okay.
And of course, they would get WIC.
All right. Were there any other agencies they needed to cooperate with to effectuate the public benefits?
We send referrals to Help Me Grow for every infant.
And did you do so in this case?
Yes.
And I apologize, I might have mentioned, and mom was to continue to have drug treatment?
Mother was to continue to have drug treatment and go to drug court and individual and counseling.
All right. And who assured you that these things would happen?
Mr. Groves and Jessica Groves.
Ultimately, was the child being Dylan Groves, baby Dylan, removed from the custody of the parents?
We obtained temporary custody of Dylan.
And as part of that custody, if Children's Services wanted the child to be produced, are the parents or who the child was placed with responsible for bringing that child to Children's Services?
Yes.
Are they required to do so?
Yes.
Your Honor, may I approach?
You may approach.
Let the record reflect I'm handing the witness, showing the counsel what has been marked as State's Exhibit 10, 11, and 12. Ma'am, if you could you tell the jury what those three documents are?
It is an order that the underlying request of protective order vesting in the custody of Dylan in Scioto County Children's Services Board.
All right, so we've got in front of you, and I'm going to put them up here on there for you. I'm going to go through them again, Your Honor. State's Exhibit 10 here. All right, it's kind of hard to see, but can you read what this case is styled as here?
In the matter of Dylan Groves and Daniel Groves.
All right, and what I have on the screen here is State's Exhibit 10. And this is, you can find on the right side what this document purports to be. What is this document I have up here on the screen?
I can't really see it.
Is that a complaint?
Complaint, yeah.
And so is this the complaint that Children's Services initially filed to obtain custody of Dylan and Daniel Groves?
Yes.
Take the other ones from you here. State's Exhibit 11. What is State's Exhibit 11? Can you see that okay?
It's the affidavit.
All right. What's the affidavit?
That is where the investigator goes and types up a filing summary, and it is signed and entered into the court when she goes to testify.
Okay. So, when a child is removed from, or when Children's Services wishes to remove a child from his or her parents, those the documents they file with the court?
Yes.
And in this particular case, do you recall if that complaint alleged an emergency at the time?
I'm unaware of that one.
Okay. Well, let me ask it this way. Was the child removed at the hospital?
Yes.
All right. And was there a court order at that point to remove the child?
Yes.
Okay. Are you sure?
I'm checking my records. No, there was no court order.
Okay. So then, after the removal, they had to get an emergency order before the next day, is that?
Yes.
Okay. And then, we have State's Exhibit 12 here. What is this document?
That's the entry from the court.
Okay. So this is the court's order from the complaint?
Yes.
Okay. And then this order, who is custody vested with? with regard to Dylan Groves?
Children's Services.
Okay. These three exhibits 10, 11, and 12, do those appear to be accurate copies of juvenile court pleadings?
Yes.
Who was, when you remove a child from his or her parents, where does the child go?
Where does he go?
Where does any child go? What's the procedure?
When a child is removed, if we cannot find kinship care or family to take care of him, we will call foster parents and other agencies to see if they would have placement.
In this particular case, who was the child initially placed with?
Andrea Bowling,
Okay. And who is Andrea Bowling to the child?
foster parent.
Okay. Is she with the Children's Services Foster Care Network?
Yes.
Okay. And tell me about Andrea Bowling.
She was called by the investigator to see if she would take placement of Dylan, in which she did, and she went to the hospital and picked him up.
Okay. I think you testified earlier yesterday that you were previously a foster parent. Is that correct?
Yes.
What kind of training do you have to become a foster parent?
You have to have 36 hours of training, and then yearly you have to have 24.
Okay. What kind of training is that?
It goes from abuse to sexual abuse, all the way up to delinquents, how to care for them, drug treatment, and that they have to follow the court orders as well as you do.
Okay. And to your knowledge, did Ms. Bowling have that training?
Yes.
And was she under those requirements to care for Dylan Groves?
Yes.
And did she take Dylan, to your knowledge, to all his medical appointments?
Yes.
Did she take Dylan, or did she contact the various agencies to help or assist with the public benefits?
Yes.
Did she maintain contact with Children's Services?
Yes, with the investigator.
Did she fully comply with every request that Children's Services made of her?
Yes.
Were there any problems or concerns with baby Dylan from his time with Ms. Bowling?
Yes, the time that it was decided that Dylan was to go with his dad.
Okay. Let me back up a step, though. With regard to how she treated Dylan and cared for Dylan, were there any concerns with Children's Services about her care of Dylan?
No, no.
Okay. All right. When did you first begin casework services in this matter?
I was transferred the case on January the 25th.
Okay. And if you need to refer to the record or your notes, feel free. I might direct you from time to time if we ask about specific activity log. All right, so I want to refer to you page 18 of 89. The date's January 24th.
Yes.
All right. Was there any kind of meeting at Children's Services that day?
There was a family team meeting.
Okay. Were you part of the family team meeting?
Yes.
All right. Who else was part of the family team meeting?
Caseworker Johnson, Miss Bowling, and the parents of Dylan.
All right. And when did you first meet the parents of Dylan?
On the 25th,
Okay.
at this meeting.
Okay, at this meeting? Okay. And I think I already had you identify them earlier. Who are the parents of Dylan Groves?
Daniel is with the black and white shirt, and Jessica is with the white cardigan.
All right. And they are the parents of Dylan Groves?
Yes.
All right. And so they were at this meeting.
Yes.
Did they arrive timely to the meeting?
They was a little late,
How late?
Probably about 15 minutes.
Okay. And was there anything to follow the meeting with Children's Services?
They had a visit,
Okay. What kind of visit were they supposed to have?
just an hour visit.
All right, where does that take place?
It happens in the conference room or in the visitation room in the other building. But theirs was in the conference room.
Okay. So everybody knows where it is. Where's Children's Services located?
3940 Gallia Street, New
Is that
Boston.
New Boston, Ohio? Okay, and that facility has the administrative offices there?
Yes,
And it also has rooms for conferences?
yes,
It also has play areas, for lack of a better word, recreational areas for kids?
yes,
Okay. So it's the one, if I drive towards Portsmouth, if I look on my left, there's an older style building and then like a little playground and like a modular building beside it.
yes,
Okay. Okay. And the conference room, was it in the main building?
yes, main building.
And was any decision made with regard to the family team meeting at that point regarding the placement of Dylan Groves?
Not at that time.
Okay. And what was discussed in the team meeting then?
We introduced ourselves. I asked if there was any concerns with Dylan, and then the parents came in and they was introduced to the foster parent.
Okay. Now, there's another son I don't want to leave out. They have another child?
Yes,
Who's that?
Daniel Groves Jr.
All right. How old is Daniel Groves at this
14.
time? 14. Was there any plan or care for Daniel?
No, Daniel was still at his dad's with
Okay.
Dad.
Okay. And what was the reasoning behind that?
Because Daniel Jr. had said that he had never seen his mom and dad do anything in front of him.
Okay. And he was 14.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a difference between a 14-year-old's ability to report an issue and a baby?
14-year-old can report, a newborn can't.
Okay. All right, so we have this team meeting. Did you go over the rules and requirements that Children's Services was going to have of the patient, or of the patients, of the parents at this meeting?
We did. We told her that she needed the drug assessment and alcohol assessment. She needed individual counseling, and she needed to comply with court orders.
And was the responsibilities and requirements that Dad had to follow as well?
Yes, he had to do the same thing.
Okay. So that was followed, you mentioned, by a visitation?
Yes.
Were you part of the visitation?
No.
Was any worker Children's Services part of the visitation?
No.
Who was in the visitation?
Jessica and Daniel and Dylan.
Okay. Initially, was Andrea Bowling part of the visitation?
She was there, and then she left.
Okay. Is that normal that they give them time with they give the baby time with the parents without foster care parent or a Children's Services worker there?
Unless it's court ordered to be supervised.
Okay. To your knowledge, was there a specific court order with regard to a visit to Children's Services
No.
being supervised?
There's no
Okay.
order.
All right. During this time period, what was Children's Services doing to effectuate their goals?
We was making referrals to help me grow, and Miss Johnson had called Mahajan.
Okay. What is Mahaj?
Mahajan is a drug and counseling center.
Okay. It's located here locally?
It's in New Boston.
All right. So we have, and Help Me Grow, is it here locally as well?
Yes.
Okay. So we have the agency, through one of its workers, contacting these and starting to set up the process for the services for the parents.
Yes.
And at some point, was there a change in the placement of baby Dylan?
Yes.
When was that?
The change was on January the 28th is when he was to pick up Dylan.
Okay. how was the change, how did the change happen?
It was, there was a conversation going on between Ms. Johnson and the supervisor that if he could pass another drug screen, that he would be able to get Dylan back. Because he had no violent criminal history, he had no involvement with CPS, and that he passed his drug screen.
Okay. And was he able to pass a drug screen at that point?
Yes,
And who administered that drug screen?
I did.
Okay. And you'd indicated before how you administered the drug screen, did he explain how that drug screen went?
He came into the building, I showed him where the restroom was, I told him not to flush the toilet or run the water. He went in, I stood at the door, and I had it cracked open.
Okay. Prior to that drug screen, did you search him? Make
No.
a search?
No,
Okay. You stayed outside. Did you have visual on him providing the sample?
no,
Okay. That sample came back clean?
clean.
All right. And from there, were arrangements made with the foster mom to give placement of Dylan to his father?
Yes,
Were there any concerns? You'd mentioned earlier there was concerns with the foster mom about that.
yes.
What were her concerns?
The concerns was that he had a criminal history and that he had a
Okay,
court
let's stop you there. You indicated he didn't have any violent criminal history, correct?
Right, there was no violence.
Okay. All right. Did she indicate anything about her observations during the...
Counsel for a moment.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, during testimony a few minutes ago, you heard some unsubstantiated claims about a criminal record of one of the defendants in this matter from a person who has not testified, or at least not yet testified. You must not speculate and consider that evidence for any purpose. You must not speculate as to whether or not that is true or not true. We'll get into that later. We'll address that at that time. Can you all follow my instruction on this matter? Is there anyone that feels that they cannot? None of the jurors have indicated they cannot follow my instruction. We'll expect you not to consider that portion of the testimony, and it will be stricken. Mr. Tiemann, you may continue.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ma'am, with regard to the visitation and the concerns expressed by Ms. Bowling, were there concerns addressed by Ms. Bowling as to her observations of the demeanor or the condition of the parents during this visitation?
It was stated that she thought they was loopy,
Okay.
that Miss Groves was loopy.
Okay. Did she make any concerns about the demeanor of Mr. Groves?
No,
Okay. Did she further explain what, according to the records, what she meant by loopy?
that she was on drugs.
Okay. All right. So at this point, is it fair to say that you've taken over the primary role in this case for Children's Services Board?
Yes,
Okay. And was Mr. Groves under the same requirements that he'd initially made? That he be clean and not addicted to drugs, that he be employed, that mom only be in the home on supervised visits, that she would continue to do drug treatment, and that he would protect his children?
yes.
What was your next step in your caseworker responsibilities?
To make sure that the placement, that Dylan was handed over to Mr. Groves on Monday.
All right. And how did that go?
I was not there. I was in El Dorado, Ohio. It took place with my supervisor.
Okay. Any indications from the record or from your knowledge that there was any issues with the transition?
They was a little late. That's all I was told.
Okay. Who was late?
Mr. Groves.
All right. So Mr. Groves was late for picking up his son?
Yes.
Okay. And when was your next contact supposed to be with Mr. Groves?
I was supposed to go out on February the 1st, which is a Friday, but due to the road conditions, I was not able to go, so I scheduled it for Monday, the 4th.
Okay. So was that the date where you were actually going to also go with Stephanie Jenkins from Help Me Grow?
Yes.
Okay. That's not a usual thing. That's not a requirement that she go with you at that point, but you guys were going that date together?
Yes.
Okay. And so when did you conduct the home visit?
I conducted it on February the 4th
Okay.
at 2 o'clock.
Could you describe the location of the home in Sauter County, Ohio?
Once you turn into the hauler, you go up, and then the trailer is back off in the woods a little bit.
Okay. Is this in or near Otway, Ohio?
Otway,
Okay. And what was the address of the home?
2241 Mount Hope Road
Okay, in Otway.
in Otway.
And is that in Sauter County, Ohio?
Yes.
Is the driveway paved or gravel or what?
It's dirt.
Dirt driveway?
Yeah.
Okay. On February 4th, what was the weather like that day?
Cold and raining.
Cold and rainy. All right. What were the conditions on the driveway?
Muddy.
Muddy. What time did you get there?
About 1:55.
Okay. It's a stupid question, but I want to make sure. That's the afternoon, right? You
Yes.
get there at 1:55 in the morning?
Yep.
Okay. Who was at the residence when you got there?
Jessica and Daniel Groves and Dylan.
What about Daniel Jr.?
He was not home from school yet.
Okay. Where does he go to school?
Northwest.
Northwest High School?
Middle school then.
Middle school then?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a corresponding note or activity log for this visit?
Yes.
Is that on page 29 of 89?
Yes.
All right. At that point, had these other services been set up for the family?
They've been scheduled.
Okay. What was scheduled?
The Help Me Grow was supposed to go out on the 1st, but she said she would go another time. But she was already in Mahajan, so
Okay. Who was already in Mahajan?
Miss Groves,
Okay. Jessica Groves?
Jessica Groves.
Okay. Was there any conversation at that point about what you expected from the parents?
It was asked if she needed to continue to go to Mahajan, and I told her that she needed to go until further notice.
Okay. Were there any issues with the home itself?
No,
Were there any issues with the surrounds of the home?
no,
Were there appropriate facilities or items to care for baby Dylan?
yes, actually, Mr. Groves was putting in a crib at that time,
Okay.
and that he had to go back and get a piece that they left out.
Did Mrs. Groves ask about or mention why she inquired about if she had to continue to go to Mahajan?
Because it conflicted with drug court.
Okay. And you informed her that she had to go to Mahajan over drug court?
No,
Okay.
she needed to continue both.
Okay. How did you explain to do that?
She would have had to work with Mahajan to schedule around it.
Okay.
But she needed to go.
Is that something that a drug facility will do to schedule around the drug court?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Did you have an opportunity to observe baby Dylan at this February 4th meeting?
Yes,
Do you recall what he was wearing that time?
a long sleeve sleeper.
Okay. Could you describe a long sleeve sleeper?
It's like a long sleeve with feet in it, and it zips up.
Okay. All right. So it's a full
suit.
body zipper. Was he wearing a hat?
No,
Did you have an opportunity, how did you observe baby Dylan?
Jessica was holding him when I was there.
Okay. And did you have an opportunity to hold the baby?
No,
Did you have an opportunity to touch or manipulate the baby?
no,
Okay. So from your visual observations, were there any injuries to Dylan?
no,
Was he making any kind of cries of pain or anything of that nature?
no.
What was his demeanor?
He was quiet. She was burping him.
Okay. Anything else eventful happened at this February 4th meeting?
Daniel Jr. came home from school and I introduced myself.
Okay. Did Daniel Jr. say anything to you?
No, he said everything was going good.
Okay. No concerns reported?
No concerns.
No medical issues shared?
No,
No indicia from anyone that there was anything amiss?
no.
After this home visit, during the next few weeks, what was your understanding of what's going to be happening in the case plan and with the parents?
That she's going to continue going to counseling, continue going to drug court, schedule a parenting class.
With regard to care of the baby, were there any other things that they needed to do for the baby?
Well, the baby did have a doctor appointment on Thursday of that week.
Okay. And to your knowledge, did the baby attend the doctor's appointments?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. Well, let's talk about, were there times during this period that Mr. Gross failed to contact you?
Yes.
Well, let's talk about the first time that he failed to do so. And if you could refer to whatever note you're looking at for.
February the 21st.
Okay, and what page are you on the records?
Would be 30 of 89.
Okay, thank you. So, what did you document with regard to contacts on February 21st?
Caseworker had made multiple phone attempts to contact Daniel. Caseworker left messages but have not had a return call. Caseworker was worried, so caseworker and another caseworker went to the address listed on case and no one was home. Caseworker staffed with Lisa Thomas, who instructed us to go to the school and talk to Daniel Jr.
Okay. Let me back you up. So, it said multiple phone attempts. When did these phone calls start happening?
Early in the morning,
Okay. What day did they start happening?
on the 21st.
Okay. Were there any phone call attempts between when you saw them and February 4th and February 21st?
No,
Okay. So these are calls that were that morning.
yes.
Had there been any discussion of a work schedule before that for Mr. Groves?
Mr. Groves informed me prior to this day that he had 6 months of time saved up at Rural King and he was taken off.
So he was going to take off. Okay. And did he indicate in that period of time that they were going on any trips to you?
No,
Did he indicate that there might be times where he has to have a sitter for the baby?
no,
Did he indicate any reason at all why he wouldn't be home with the child?
no,
Had he provided you with what you thought were good phone numbers to contact him?
yes.
And so at this point, how again did you try to get a hold of Mr. Groves?
Me and another caseworker went to the school and talked to Daniel, and I gave him a note that had his dad to call me ASAP.
Okay. And were there any other steps to get a hold of Mr. Groves?
We left notes in the door and in the mailbox that I was there.
Okay. So you went back to the residence that day on February 21st?
Yes.
Did you see anyone at the residence that day?
We actually saw Daniel Jr. walking once he got off the bus.
Okay. Back to this period of February 24th or February 4th through 21st, was Help Me Grow also trying to contact the family?
Yes.
Were they successful to your knowledge?
No.
Did you notice anything different about the residence or the property when you went to the property on the 21st?
Other than there was a chain across the road and it said no trespassing, and there was 2 dogs.
Did you see any cars there at the address?
Not the cab, the little red car they had was gone.
All right. What was your next action after that?
I tried face-to-face contact on the next morning. No cars was there.
Was that Friday, February 22nd?
Yes,
Between your contact on the 21st and your point on the 22nd, had you received any kind of contact from the Groves family?
no.
What was the next step to try to contact them?
The next step was on the 25th. I completed my monthly home visit. Dylan appeared to be clean and appropriate dress.
Had they gotten a hold of you between when you left your note on the 21st and the 25th?
No,
Did you leave another note on the 22nd as well?
yes,
All right. So during this period, you left several notes. Well, three notes.
3 notes.
All right. One with Dylan Jr., one in the mailbox, and a second one in the mailbox?
And a card in the door.
And a card in the door?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So you get there on the 25th of February, correct?
Yes.
All right. And was there any explanation given as to why they didn't call you back?
They said they went to the doctor on the 21st.
Okay. But no call after, did they acknowledge getting the notes?
Did not.
All right. So tell us about this visit on the 25th of February. Who all was there?
Daniel and Jessica and Dylan.
How was Dylan?
Dylan was fine. Daniel had stated that he went to the doctor and he weighed 8 pounds and 9 ounces and was 22 inches long.
All right. And you're referring to your note on page 31 of 89 of the
Yes.
activity log? Okay. Was everything at the house appropriate?
Yes.
Was there any issues brought up by Daniel to you?
No.
Was there any concerns at this point about issues with his requirements under the case plan?
No.
Was there any concerns brought up about Jessica's compliance with the case plan?
Jessica was not spending the night there. She was there during the day, but she was not living there.
Who told you that?
Daniel.
Okay. Certainly, in this time period, were you guys going out at night and checking to see if she were there?
Not at that time.
Okay, so at that point, you're relying on Daniel's representations that Jessica is not sleeping there.
Yes.
Do you recall what, and I know it's been a year, but do you recall what baby Dylan was wearing on this visit?
It was cold that day, so he was wearing a long sleeve sleeper.
Okay. Anything on his head?
Nope.
You're inside a house. Is the house warm?
Yes.
Okay. Did Dylan have a lot of hair?
Not a lot. It was starting to grow.
Could you see the scalp and the skull?
Yes.
Were there any injuries that you noted to the scalp or the skull?
No.
All right. Any injuries to Dylan in any other way?
No.
Did you inquire if everyone was keeping their appointments?
Yes.
And did either parent indicate that they weren't keeping their appointments?
No, they said they was keeping them.
All right. Was Daniel there when you inquired?
Junior or?
Senior, Daniel
Yes,
Senior.
he was.
Okay. And did he volunteer anything to the contrary?
No.
Did either parent indicate that Mrs. Gross had not been compliant with her drug treatment since February 8th?
No.
At that point, had Mrs. Groves given any indication, any clear indication of where she was staying at night?
Friends and family.
Any other details besides that?
That was it.
Was your impression that that was a multiple locations?
Yes.
Did either of them ever admit to you that she was staying at the residence more than allowed?
No.
Did Mr. Groves ever take you aside and say, hey, things aren't what they're supposed to be?
Never.
When was the next time you were supposed to see the father?
3/18.
Had there been a time that I'll strike that. What was the 3/18 visit supposed to be?
And my monthly home visit.
Where was that? Was that visit to take place there at Mount Hope Road?
Yes.
And did the visit take place that day?
Not that day.
Why not?
I got a call stating that he was in Canton, Ohio with his father who had a heart attack. And he needed to schedule it for Thursday at 9 a.m.
Okay, and this is referring to your note on page 32 of 89?
Yes.
Dated 3/18/2019? Okay. So when did that call come in?
That morning.
When were you supposed to be at the home?
That morning.
Okay. Was this a sudden thing, according to the text?
Yes.
Okay. Were you able to ever confirm that story?
No.
Did you make attempts to confirm the story?
Later on.
Okay. Was the visit rescheduled?
Yes.
When was it rescheduled to?
3/21.
Did that visit occur?
No.
All right, so you're looking initially probably at page 32 of 89 to page 33, is that
Yes.
correct? Okay. So that morning, was it the morning that you went to the home?
Yes.
And was there anyone there?
No.
Had you received any call at that point from Mr. Groves?
A voicemail.
Okay. When did the voicemail come in, do you know?
After I got back in the office
Okay.
is when I got it.
And what did the voicemail say?
That his dad got worse and he is still in Canton.
All right. And did you recognize Mr. Groves' voice on the voicemail?
Yes.
Okay. When's the next time you saw anyone with regard to the Groves case?
3/27.
And what happened on that day?
We had our hearing here at juvenile court. Jessica Groves showed up, but Daniel didn't.
Okay. And a hearing, we talked about the process early on in your testimony yesterday. This hearing, was it referred to as an adjudication?
Yes.
Okay. And what's the adjudication about, basically?
That's where the investigator testifies of why she removed Dylan.
Okay. I'm actually going to hand you what have been marked States Exhibits 13 and 14. I'm going to back up a minute. You remember when we had that discussion of the ex parte emergency order that was put on by the judge?
Yes.
Would there be another order confirming that?
Should be.
Okay. I'm going to put up on the screen here. Well, I'll hand it to you first after I approach counsel. States Exhibits 13 and 14, counsel. I'm handing you what's been marked as States Exhibit 13. Do you recognize that document?
Yes.
What is that document?
Is the decision.
Okay. is that the decision for the confirming the initial emergency order?
Yes.
And does that decision keep custody of children's services?
Yes.
All right. And that's dated
January the 28th.
January 28th, okay. So I'm going to put it up here on the screen. The State's Exhibit 13 appear to be a true and accurate copy of the court's entry.
Yes.
Okay. So this came on from problem calls on January 17th, 2019. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. So with that, this entry, is it fair to say this entry basically confirms that emergency removal at the time?
Yes.
Does it provide any additional detail other than command of custody of children's services?
That's it.
I have in front of you what's marked as State's Exhibit 14. Could you identify that for the court?
That is the entry of the court, of the adjudication that was held on March the 27th.
Okay, and this is the date we were talking about before I remembered I hadn't given you the other, right?
Yes.
Okay. Were you at that adjudication?
Yes.
Who all was there?
Myself, our attorney, their attorneys, and Jessica Groves.
Okay. And would Dylan be at that adjudication?
Dylan was not at that.
Okay. And that's not abnormal for the child to be at the adjudication, is that correct?
Right.
Okay. And was Mr. Groves at that adjudication?
No.
Was he supposed to be?
Yes.
Are you required to be present at all court hearings?
Yes.
Did you get a chance to talk to the mother, Jessica Groves, about him not being there?
Yes.
Did she indicate where he was?
No.
Did she indicate she knew where he was?
No.
Did you ask her where he was?
No.
Did anybody ask her where he was?
I don't know what the attorneys asked them.
Okay. And just for the record, I'm placing on the overhead of March State's Exhibit 14. In this adjudication, who did custody of Dylan Groves stay with?
Children's Services.
Again, our exhibits 12, 13, and 14 were 14 true and accurate copies of the entries from juvenile court.
Yes.
Did you inform the mother of anything that was going to happen the next day?
I gave her a card and told her if she sees Daniel, I'll be at his house on March the 28th at 8 a.m.
All right, and that's the next day after the hearing?
Yes.
Had you heard from Daniel at that point?
No.
Now, on March 28th, you indicated you were going to be out at the home at 8 a.m.
Yes.
And I believe we would be on page 33 and 34 of your activity log. Is that correct?
Yes.
Were you able to see some individuals at the home that day?
Yes.
Who all was there?
Daniel, Jessica, and Dylan.
Did Daniel explain to you where he was when he should have been in court?
No.
Did you inquire?
No.
Is missing court a big thing?
Depends on the parent.
All right. For you, is it a big thing?
There's a lot that don't come.
Okay. What kind of people don't come to court?
Ones that's hiding stuff.
Objection, speculation, Your Honor.
I'll withdraw the question. When someone misses court who is a parent in your caseload, do they often explain why they miss court?
No.
And again, Mr. Groves did not explain any rationale for missing court the day before?
Correct.
Did he talk about his trip to Canton?
No,
Did he talk about his ill grandfather?
no,
Objection, Your Honor, I believe that Mrs. Flowers, that she has previously discussed. Further reading.
They're taking good notes, and we'll follow up with that on cross-examination. Objection overruled.
Who was there at the home?
Jessica Groves and Dylan and Daniel.
Daniel Sr.?
Yes.
Okay. And how was Dylan?
Dylan was taking a bottle when I got there.
Who was feeding him?
Jessica,
Do you recall what he was wearing?
a long sleeve sleeper.
Okay. Was he making any crying or any other sounds?
No,
Was there a point where he wasn't taking the bottle when you were there?
yes,
When was that?
when I was getting ready to leave.
Did he make any sounds then?
No,
Who was holding him at that point?
Jessica,
Was Dylan manipulated or moved around from your observations at that point?
no,
Was Dylan wearing a hat?
no,
You indicated he was wearing a sleeper. You described one earlier. Is that the same style?
yes,
Long sleeves, pant legs?
yes,
Did you note any injuries to his head?
no,
If his head were swollen or black and blue, would you have noticed that?
yes.
Did Ms. Groves ask you anything about her case plan?
They just assured me that they was keeping all scheduled appointments,
All right, so who's assuring you of that?
both of them.
All right, so both of them, you're saying all appointments are kept?
Yes,
Did they indicate they were going to drug court?
yes,
Did they indicate they were going to counseling at Mahajan?
yes,
Did they talk about Jessica's sobriety?
that she was maintaining her Mahajan appointments.
Okay. And who again assured you these things were happening?
Both Jessica and Daniel.
Did they ask you about, did one of them or both of them ask you about Jessica getting to be back in the home?
Yes, they asked if there was any possibility for Jessica to come back in the home so she can bond with Dylan.
What were your indications at that point?
I stated I had to take it to the supervisor.
Did you discuss with them upcoming appointments or anything of that nature?
I told them that they had another court hearing on April the 3rd.
Before April 3rd, were there any attempts to contact Daniel or Jessica?
There was one on the 28th with Jessica. I got no response
Was this after your home visit?
after I had left, yes.
Was there an attempt to contact Daniel after your home visit?
I texted Daniel's phone also on the same day, asking him to call me. He texted back and said he would call me just as soon as he could get signal. That he had been sitting with Jessica after I left this morning. He stated she went to the bathroom and had a spell with her UTI and she was sick and was trying to get into the doctor. Been waiting on a call back. He stated he was taking her to the ER and will call caseworker in a minute. Caseworker stated, call me when you get a chance, not a hurry.
Let me ask you, were you able to tell if there's any kind of phone signals out in Otway where they live?
Very limited phone service. You can get a text better than you can get a phone call.
All right, because I noticed a lot of these interactions are via text.
Correct.
Was that the reason?
Yes.
Okay. And did Mr. Groves call you back that day?
No.
What day again was that? 28th?
28th.
Did Mr. Groves call you the next day?
No.
or text you or contact you in any way?
No,
What about the day after that?
no, till April the 3rd is the last time that I had texted him. Okay.
So during this period of time, you're making other texts or attempts to contact them? What was supposed to happen on April 3rd?
Court hearing,
Juvenile court?
juvenile court.
And did the court hearing go forward?
It was rescheduled for April the 18th.
Between April 3rd and April 18th, did you attempt to contact Mr. Groves?
Before that, on the day that I visited on March the 28th, I had scheduled my next appointment for April the 9th.
Okay. What note are you looking at there?
I'm on the 4-3 on page 35.
Okay, thank you. Did Mr. Groves specifically text you on April 4th?
Yes.
All right. What did he say?
Stated that everything was okay and going great. He explained that his and Jessica's phone has minutes on them right now, so he borrowed a government phone. Daniel stated he'd text Monday, but he realized it was the wrong number and that him and the phones tended not to get along. Daniel stated that he was sick for a few days, which started on Friday and lasting through Tuesday, and is still feeling in somewhat. He continued to say that Jessica is still battling with her UTI. Daniel stated that they went to Canton on Tuesday and got stranded up there till about 3 p.m. yesterday. Car broke down on us and had to wait on a part to be delivered to be part store yesterday around noon, as I know my lawyer was telling you about it. Daniel asked why did the hearing get moved to the 18th. Haven't got to speak to my lawyer a lot yet. Let me know when you got those messages. You are still coming out next Tuesday, I assume. Send text on the phone if you need to contact me or Jessica from now on. We will let you know when we have minutes.
All right. So on April 4th, you received this text. There's no phone conversation between the two of you, correct?
Correct.
It's simply a text and basically saying, we've had some bad luck. We went up to Canton. Bad luck happened. We'll get back with you. Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
There's additional, we don't need to go through that, but was he also asking via text about maybe getting some gas vouchers and things of that nature?
Yes.
He also indicated, maybe I misspoke earlier, there was an uncle up north that was going to get him a dinner to go out for their anniversary.
Yes.
And so he was asking to reschedule something at that point because of that free dinner.
Yes.
Right? What was he asking to reschedule?
To reschedule the home visit that I had scheduled for April the 9th.
Okay. And were you accommodating?
Yes.
Were there attempts during this period, after this period, to contact Daniel and Jessica?
I tried on 4/17 to inform him that the GAL was coming out to his house between 4:30 and 5 o'clock that day.
Okay. What's a GAL?
Guardian ad litem.
All right. Is that somebody involved in the custody case?
Yes.
All right. Is it their job to look at the home, evaluate whether it's in the best interest for the child to be placed back with the parents on custody issues, that kind of thing?
Yes,
Okay. So that person was trying to get a hold of the Groves as well?
yes,
And were you informing them of the next home visit as well via text that would take place on April 24th?
yes.
At this point in time, are you making a number of texts or attempting a number of contacts with Daniel?
I had 4 separate phone numbers that he was texting me from.
Were you trying all 4 of those numbers?
All 4 of those numbers was being tried.
And apparently the guardian ad litem was, to your knowledge, was the guardian ad litem trying those numbers as well?
Yes,
During this time, did Mr. Groves ever reach out to you or anyone to tell you that something was wrong with Dylan?
no,
During this time, to your knowledge, did Mr. Groves reach out to anyone to tell them that there was something wrong with Dylan?
no,
To your knowledge, were there any calls to 911?
no,
Did you learn of some additional information on April 17th from Mahajan Therapeutics?
yes.
What did you learn?
Jessica had not been compliant.
How long had she not been compliant?
She had not had her individual therapist or any compliant. February the 8th was her last individual session, and her last group attendance was March the 26th.
Was she supposed to continue to have individual sessions during the period of February and March?
Yes,
So other than this one noted group attendance on March 26th, had she been compliant with Mahajan?
no, just the 26th,
And if I recall, is that the date before the hearing?
date before the hearing.
Again, nobody from the Groves family informed you of noncompliance.
Correct, nobody informed me.
There's, when was the next court hearing supposed to take place?
4/18,
Did that hearing take place?
yes.
And who attended that hearing?
His attorney, her attorney, myself, and our attorney. Mr. and Mrs. Grove was not there.
Did anyone try to contact Mr. and Mrs. Groves?
Yes, we text messaged all numbers that we had.
Any response? At that time?
No,
I'm going to hand you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 15. Show this opposing counsel for the record. And what is this document purport to be?
an entry.
From Sauter County Juvenile Court?
Yes,
Is that the dispositional entry of what happened on April 18th?
yes,
Does that appear to be a true and accurate copy of the records of the juvenile court?
yes,
To your knowledge, are all those records kept in the ordinary course of their business, juvenile court,
yes,
and our official court records?
yes,
In this entry, it's custody to remain with Sauter County Children's Services
correct,
as to Dylan Groves.
yes.
Did you receive another contact from Daniel, Mr. Groves, Daniel Sr., via text?
Yes, on the 19th.
prior to that text, were any attempts made to contact them? We'll refer to page 44.
We tried on the 18th. We text messaged him while we was in court.
Okay.
And then we didn't get no response.
Okay. I'm going to move on to the next day. What did you do then?
I received a text on April the 19th stating he was still up north and that a friend is watching his home while he is away. But I also made a home visit, an unannounced home visit with another caseworker that morning.
Okay, so that was before this text.
Yes,
So you go out to the home with another caseworker,
yes.
and what do you do when you get to the home?
We knocked on the door for several minutes. We looked around. I left a card in the door and in the mailbox for him to call me.
Was anyone home to your knowledge?
No,
Then you received there's a contact made to Rural King, correct?
yes,
Was that before or after the text from Daniel?
before.
Okay. You contacted Rural King. Why did you contact Rural King?
I wanted to verify he was working, and maybe he went back to work, is what I thought.
Okay. What did they indicate as to his employment status?
He had not been working there since 2018.
Do you recall when in 2018 he quit working there?
No,
So you received this text that they're up north, friends watching the house. Does he say anything or represent to you anything about the health of Dylan?
he said Dylan is doing great, growing like a weed, LOL. I was going to contact you when I returned from this trip this weekend. My uncle come down and picked us up because my car is broken down and can't really drive my truck from hitting a deer. My friend is going to drive my truck this weekend, some just like from his house to mine, which is only like 8 miles away from my house, and he sometimes we'll be riding the four-wheeler back and forth as well, he told me. But I will contact you when I return home. It will probably be Monday night or Tuesday morning, whenever my uncle can bring us back. But I will definitely be in contact with you. Is court still set for May 18th? Just wondering, because that's what the last paperwork I received, it would be anyways. But wanted to let you know everything was okay with us, and sorry haven't been in contact. It's just been rough having no phone, and I hate to ask to use other people's phone. I feel like I bother to them. LOL. Happy Easter to you and your family. Talk to you next week.
He's already contacted you from 4 different numbers, right?
Yes.
Once again, this uncle's coming down to pick him up.
Yes.
He mentioned May 18th as a court date. What was the court date supposed to be?
April 8th.
April 18th. He mentions that Dylan is growing like a weed.
Yes.
LOL. Did you have any concerns at this point, probably earlier, but did you have any concerns at this point about how things were going?
Yes.
Let me ask you this. As a caseworker at Children's Services, again, how long had you worked there?
I worked there, before I got Dylan's case, I was there 6 months.
Okay, in that 6 months, had you had a number of cases that you worked on?
Yes.
Is it sometimes common for people not to contact you?
Not all the time.
Not all the time? Okay. Did this case concern you more than those other cases?
Yes,
How so?
because I hadn't had contact for so long with him and where we was trying to get in touch with him.
And so at this point in the thing, he's supposed to stay in contact with you.
Yes,
Mr. Groves is supposed to ensure the children are protected, correct?
yes,
Mr. Groves assured you that Mrs. Groves would be going to drug treatment, correct?
yes, yes,
That she wasn't in the house more than what you guys allowed.
correct,
He had represented to you that he was employed.
correct.
So what was the plan of Children's Services at this point with regard to baby Dylan?
I continued to try to make contact with them throughout, from the 19th. I went on the 22nd, the 23rd, the
Okay.
24th.
At this point, were there any thoughts to remove baby Dylan from their care?
Yes,
Okay. At this point, were there any thoughts with regard to Daniel Jr.?
we had took custody of Daniel Jr. on the 24th.
Okay. So let's back up a day. You said that you went to the home, was that April 23rd?
Yes,
All right. What did you observe at the home?
no one was home, so we left a note in the door and in the mailbox. The items on the porch was not the ones that was left on the porch Friday evening when I was out there with the sheriff. No one answered the door. There was a trailer parked in front of a camper. The attachment to the truck was off. Truck was turned around differently. Bathroom window was up, down, and the living room window was up. Motion detectors made the noise where in the past they never made the noise.
Let's talk about that a minute. You mentioned before there was sometimes a chain or a wire across the road to get to the home, the driveway?
Yes.
Okay. Were there also, did you notice motion detectors?
Yes.
Where were those located?
As you're going into the driveway, it's almost to their trailer. One's on this side and one's back here.
All right. And they, to your knowledge, were those located there every time you'd visited?
Yes, but they never made a sound.
Okay, so this time they're making a sound.
Yes,
You indicated that there were items on the porch from the previous Friday.
yes.
What were those items again?
There was some water jugs, some shoes. There was some sort of like a ladder up against the wall of the trailer on the porch.
Okay.
It was
And
cleaned.
it was clean?
Yeah, it wasn't cleaned before.
Okay. So somebody had been there.
Yes.
How long did you stay, to your knowledge, if you recall, at that residence on 423?
5 or 10 minutes because we knocked and screamed and looked around.
Look in the window,
Yes,
pound on the doors.
yes.
What did you do next?
Then we went to the school to talk to Daniel Jr.
And just for clarification, this is on April 23rd?
Yes,
And was that a Tuesday, to your knowledge?
yes,
So Daniel was in school at Northwest. You went and spoke to him?
yes.
What was his demeanor?
He was nervous. talking to us. He calmed down a little bit later on. We just asked about Dylan, and he stated he was fine. I also asked him about his mom staying at the house, and he said yes, and then said occasionally. I did request to tell his dad that I needed to talk to him ASAP.
Did you ask him about anybody else in their family?
I asked him about the Daniel's Senior's dad, which would be Daniel Jr.'s granddad.
What did he say?
Who was that?
Was it your understanding that Daniel Senior's dad was the one in Canton?
Yes.
So when you asked about Daniel Jr.'s grandfather,
He had no clue who I was talking about.
was there any change in plans regarding Daniel Jr. at this point?
Not at this time.
What was the next action by Children's Services?
We went back to the office, and then on,
Skip ahead to page 50 of 89.
I received a text on the 23rd, received a text saying they both, if you can find them, which that was where we had staff with our supervisor about taking both Daniel and Jessica if we could find them.
All right, that's page 51 of 89. So at that point, Children's Services has decided we're going to get physical as well as legal custody of both.
Yes.
All right, how did you obtain custody or physical custody of Daniel Jr.?
I went out on the day, and I had called the school and told them not to let Daniel leave the school, that I would be out there to pick him up.
And did you do so?
Yes.
And were you able to find an appropriate placement for Daniel Jr. at that point?
Yes.
Who?
He's with his aunt and uncle.
Okay. Was there an evaluation on their home?
Yes.
Safety audit?
Yes.
Drug screens?
Yes. Background check.
Background check?
Yes.
Okay. When you were there, did they receive a text from Daniel Groves Sr.?
Yes.
Did you have the opportunity to review that text?
Yes.
What was that text about?
They wanted to know why Daniel didn't get off the school bus.
So at that point, it's still April 23rd, correct?
Correct. 24th.
24th, I'm sorry. So at that point, on April 24th, you guys act, you remove Daniel Jr. from the home, so he doesn't get off the school bus. And while you're still at that home getting him settled, they receive a text saying Daniel didn't get off the school bus.
Correct.
From Daniel Groves Sr.
Yes.
Did you receive a text from Daniel Sr.?
Later on that evening, I did.
What was it about?
He texted me asking why I took Daniel. Daniel stated that, I mean, come on, do you know what you're doing to him? This will affect his schoolwork. His whole life will be. I can't believe you took him. He never had nothing to do with any of the situation at all, and this is hurting him more than anything or anyone. Where is he anyway?
So at this point, via the text, Mr. Groves is expressing concern? I mean, there's some, that you guys removed Daniel from there.
Yes,
Matter of fact, in the record, you have a lot of question marks after some of his questions, like multiple question marks and an exclamation point.
yes.
Is that correct? So he's concerned at that point about what Children's Services is doing with Daniel Jr.
Yes.
What was Children's Services' next step? What was your next step with regard to this case? Oh, wait a minute, let me back up. Do you receive any did you attempt any more visits at the residence?
On April the 30th. April the 24th, the day that I received the text from Daniel on why I took Daniel when I was placing him, I left the placement and went directly to the home.
Why'd you do that then?
Pardon me?
Why did you decide to do that then?
Because he had wanted to know how Daniel wasn't there, so I thought, well, then they're home, so I went out there.
Okay. Was anyone there when you got there?
No.
Did you knock on the door?
I knocked, I screamed, I even jumped up and down to try to see if there was anybody in the house. The dogs was barking. The windows was opposite this time. The living room window was down and the bathroom was up.
Any cars or vehicles?
Both cars was there.
All right,
The truck and the car, and then the four-wheeler was there.
what was your understanding of the car that they got around in?
The red Cavalier, I believe
Okay.
it's a Cavalier.
And was it
Cobalt.
there?
Yes, it was there.
Okay. During this time period, and if you could talk in general, were there texts forwarded to you or directed to you that were from Daniel?
Yes.
What was the nature of those texts?
There was one on 4/26 that stated, well, the person that was supposed to give him a ride to court this morning just screwed them over and
Okay.
said they...
So another excuse.
Correct.
Was there another text later?
Back and forth.
Okay. More excuses.
More excuses.
What action was taken by, was there a representation made by Daniel Sr. to you that he would be returning baby Dylan?
Yes.
What was the date of that representation?
There was one text that I had sent Daniel that he needed to have Dylan and Daniel Jr. stuff at the agency on 4/25. And then once again, I received a text at 7:52 a.m. stating that he'd bring Dylan to our agency the first thing Tuesday morning,
Okay, what page are you on for that, ma'am?
55 of 89.
Thank you. Did Mr. Groves bring baby Dylan in that morning?
No.
After they failed to show what happened next, did the agency file any kind of report?
On the 30th, I filed a missing person report,
Who did you file that report with?
Scioto County Sheriff's Department.
Okay. this time, did you also receive information from Christ Care Pediatrics?
I received information from them on May the 1st. I received an email stating that they was trying to get in touch with me.
To your knowledge, had Christ Care been attempting to contact the parents as well?
Yes.
And were they successful in contacting the parents?
No.
Was there a medical concern? Well, at least at that time, were you under the impression that there was a medical concern regarding Dylan from Christ Care Pediatrics?
Yes, the nurse from CrossCare called and informed that they needed to repeat some lab work on Dylan back in February that his parents had not completed. Dylan had an abnormal newborn screening, and if it's not treated, it could cause brain damage. She faxed all the paperwork to caseworker, and she said that he also had an appointment on May the 2nd, also at 2 p.m.
All right. Now, did that turn out that that was actually a lack of communication between the doctors, that there was the subsequent tests and he was normal?
Yes.
Okay. But at that point in time, did that add to your concerns?
Yes.
All right. If you would, can you go to the second paper clip? It should be page 1 of 53 of the activity log. Are you there?
Yes.
Okay. So at this time, what was the agency doing to try to get baby Dylan back?
We was trying, I was text messaging him. I was trying to get a court order for the sheriff to help. We also did tried to get an Amber Alert.
Okay. How many texts were you sending?
I texted him on every phone number that I had for him.
Did you make any attempts to follow up with any relatives up north?
Yes.
Did you have any luck with that?
No.
What did you do to try to find them?
I Googled the Grove's name in Canton, Ohio. So I took each name and dialed every phone number. A lot of the numbers was disconnected, but the people that I did talk to didn't know who I was talking about.
So every Groves listed under Google in Canton, Ohio, you made an attempt to call.
Yes.
The numbers that Daniel had given you earlier that you called him on, was anybody responding to those?
No.
Had Daniel ever given you a number of any of his relatives up north?
No.
Had Daniel ever given you a name of any of his relatives up north?
No.
You had mentioned an Amber Alert. Let's back up a moment. On May 3rd, was there another attempt to locate the family at the residence? On
Yes.
Page 3 of 53.
Yes.
Okay. Who all went there that time?
Myself, another caseworker, and a deputy sheriff.
Okay. Any luck?
No.
What cars were there?
There was no red Cavalier in the driveway, but the truck was there. The camper was there. There was another white vehicle there with the doors open.
Stephen, you may continue to inquire.
I'm going to direct your attention to May of 2019, of various attempts that Children's Services made to locate baby Dylan. Was there an attempt made on May 7th at the residence to locate the Groves family?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Yes.
Okay. Was that the one where another caseworker, Megan Hankins, went out?
Yes.
Okay. At that point, was the car there?
Yes. As well as the full-size pickup truck, Dodge.
Okay, all the vehicles that you knew they may have utilized?
Yes.
Okay. Was there another attempt on May 15th by Children's Services at the residence? And that would be page 16 of 53.
Yes.
And these attempts are Children's Services staff kind of doing the same MO. They're leaving notes, they're knocking on the doors, they're looking to see if there's movement or lights or anything of that nature?
Yes.
Okay. And on May 15th, the Cavalier was gone, is that correct?
Cavalier was gone, but the red truck was still parked in the same spot.
Okay.
Appeared to be unmoved.
Then again, on May 23rd, which would be on page 20 of 53, was there another attempt at the residence?
There was another attempt of the vehicle. I'm sorry, another attempt to the home. She parked at the end of the driveway and walked the driveway.
Okay. In an effort at stealth?
There was a red car, the red Cavalier was there.
Okay, but what was the purpose for parking at the end of the driveway?
The road.
Okay. Road conditions versus just trying to...
Correct.
Okay. Well, May 31st, was there another attempt at a home visit? It'd be
Yes.
page 23. Okay. No red Cavalier? Truck in
No.
the same spot?
No red Cavalier in the driveway, and the red Dodge pickup truck appeared to not have been moved.
And on June 7th, was there another attempt at a home visit?
Yes.
Now, during this time in May, were you also contacting different entities to see if there had been any contact with the Groves family?
Yes, we called Care Source.
Well, let's say numerous government entities,
Yes.
attorneys,
Yes.
family members,
Yes.
Daniel Jr.
Yes.
Was it your understanding that juvenile court personnel was also out looking for the Groves?
Yes.
Was it your understanding that at different times the sheriff office was also out looking for the Groves?
Yes.
Ultimately, on June 10th, were the Groves apprehended by law enforcement?
Yes.
Were you aware of an allegation that when questioned, there was indication that Dylan was taken by Children's Services months ago?
Yes, I received a call at 9:21 p.m. Stating that they have arrested Daniel and Jessica Groves, and that they informed me that Jessica and Daniel was telling them that I came several months ago and took the child.
Did Children's Services take the child?
No, the last day I seen Dylan alive was March the 28th.
And then you learned on June 12th when Dylan's body was found?
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Next, may cross-examine the witness.
Just a second, Your Honor.
Good morning, Mrs. Kraft. We're going to, prosecutor went through quite a few things with you, and we're going to sort of start all over, start back quite a bit. When you mentioned your, how long had you been with the agency? I think you mentioned that earlier.
I was hired in June of 2018.
So, okay. And you mentioned, where did you work before that?
Shawnee Family Health Center,
Shawnee Family Health Center, which is,
a mental health facility and a physician's office
okay, what did you do there?
as a caseworker,
Okay. Same type of work,
just with adults.
just with adults? Okay. Where did you work before that?
I worked for Rest Care.
Okay. Did you have any sort of casework experience before that?
Just with my internship that I had for my degree.
Oh, okay. Okay. So when you came over to Children's Services, was there any training involved?
We do core training.
You do what? I'm sorry?
Core training.
Core training?
It's 8 trainings that we have to go to throughout the first year.
Okay. Are those somewhere that you go to?
It's
or-
Athens.
Athens?
Yes.
Okay. Are they a week long, day long? How long are they?
Some of them's 2 days, some of them's 1 day. It just depends on what the core training is for that week, or
Okay.
that month.
And you have done, you said 8 of them?
8 of them.
Okay. When you got involved in this case, have you done all your training?
Not all 8.
Not all 8. How many have you done?
I had done 6 at that time.
I'm sorry?
6 at that
6?
time.
Okay. All right. So, is it fair to say that if you not completed your core training, that you're still working as a caseworker and responsible for high-profile cases?
We're still involved in cases.
Okay, all right. You weren't working you didn't have you're the only caseworker on this case, right?
Yes,
Okay, all right. So
in January, starting in January the 25th.
okay, so I'm trying to get at, you were the only caseworker on this case, but you had not completed your training.
Correct.
Okay. In that training, are you taught or given examples of how to write a report, how to put information into this activity log?
Yes,
Okay. Are you told what to specifically put into this activity log?
the safety, the surroundings, if the baby's clean, if we view any marks, anything like that.
Okay. Is it general or is it specific as to what you put in the activity log?
Well,
The training.
Oh, at the training?
Yeah.
Oh, it's specific. It depends on the child and the surroundings, what we put in there. But the safety we check, the housing, the baby if they're cleaning, just safety needs and basic needs.
Okay. What I'm getting at is that core training, do they tell you to be specific or do they give you certain wordage that you need to put in there?
We need to be detailed.
Detail. Do they look for specific words? Do they say at training you need to put these specific words in it?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily. Okay, thank you. You did 3 home visits, correct?
Yes.
Well, I mean, you made many attempts.
Attempts, but I had seen the child 3 times.
3 times. On February 4th,
Yes,
on February 25th,
yes,
and on March 28th.
yes.
Okay. I would like you to read these activity logs. You don't have to go through some of the case category or location type or any of that information. I want you to read the date, who created the activity log, and I want you to read the narrative. And let's start with February 4th. Oh, I'm sorry, that's, I got that as page 24 of 46. You need to take this out. It's,
Okay.
okay. Could you, activity date, created by, and then the narrative.
It was created on February the 4th
Okay,
by Patricia Kraft.
okay,
And it states, caseworker completed 7-day home visit with Dylan and Daniel. Jessica and Daniel both were there when caseworker was visiting. Dylan is doing good, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Daniel came in from school when caseworker was there. Daniel stated that things was going good. Jessica stated that Mahajan has her on a low risk. Jessica also stated about drug court. At that time, she is
No,
going.
let me stop you right there. I think you're ad-libbing a little bit, and I would like for you to read it word for word.
Jessica stated that Mahajan has her on low risk. Jessica also stated about drug court.
No, that's not,
Asked
you're-
about drug court.
yes, let's,
Jessica also asked about drug court. At this time, she is going to Mahajan's twice a week and gets drug screened twice a week. She goes through groups the same
No,
time.
no.
She has groups the same time as drug court. So caseworker advised her to go to Mahajan until further notice.
let me just stop. Your Honor, I would like you to instruct the witness to read it verbatim.
Your Honor, oh my.
Briefly.
You want us to come to the bench?
No, ma'am, read it to the best of your ability. The document speaks for itself. If you want her to read it, that's fine. If you don't like how she read it, Mr. Stratton, you can have the jury review it if it's submitted as evidence.
Yes, Your Honor. Please, continue, Mrs. Kraft.
So caseworker advised her to go to Mahajan until further notice. Jessica and Daniel asked about the immunization card, crib card from Dylan's discharge paper. Caseworker will locate them for them. Dylan has a crib, a swing, and all necessary things. Dylan has a doctor's appointment on Thursday. Dylan and Daniel's basic needs are being met by the parents. Dylan and Daniel appeared clean and appropriately dressed. No placement concerns were reported. No medical concerns were reported. Interaction between the parents and children appeared positive and supportive. No physical hazards in or around the home at the time of visit. There is no safety plan in effect currently. While assessing the child's safety, well-being, and the appropriateness of placement, caseworker determined vulnerability for CAN is low. There is no status change reported for the parents.
For the jury, could you explain what CAN is?
Child abuse and neglect.
Okay. And again, that says low, correct?
Correct.
Okay. I am going to show you what is Defense Exhibits A1 through H1.
Mr. Scrapp gets that back and put it over there right together before we move on to the next topic. Thank you, ma'am.
Could you tell me what those are photos of?
The home, the living room, the bedroom, Dylan's playpen, another playpen, another playpen, a playpen, and playpen.
What were the numbers on those exhibits, or letters on those exhibits?
A1 through H1. So A1, is this the home of the Groves?
Yes,
Okay. And these are the windows that you mentioned before that you looked in, correct?
yes,
You look in all of them?
no.
Okay. Did you look in these windows?
I looked inside the door.
Well, inside the door, okay?
Yeah,
You said you had to jump?
yeah.
See that? So, B1. B1. You said you looked in the home, you've done 3 home visits. Did you, throughout the house, look in the rooms, make sure there were a bed, food is clean?
Daniel was putting a crib together. He had it to be put together when the first visit I was there.
Okay, is this the crib you're talking about?
No,
Okay, all right. So have you ever seen this crib before?
no, not that one.
Not that one, okay. Again, what is that a picture of?
Bed.
C1, you know what this is a picture of? So, but you said you went to every room.
No, I didn't go to every room.
You didn't go to them? You didn't? You didn't go to every room? You didn't check out the house?
I don't, the only time I do a safety check is, safety audit, is if we remove a child ourselves and have to put them in there. Usually the investigator does the safety audit of the home.
So on these other exhibits, you mentioned, again, you don't know what this crib is. You have never seen this crib.
Never seen that one.
Okay. And, never seen that. Same picture, same crib.
What exhibit is that, Mr. Sheriff?
Oh, E1, Your Honor. All in order there. And then, a couple other pictures of the crib that you have not seen. G1 there, Your Honor. And then, picture of closer to the crib that you claim you have not seen. Correct?
Correct.
Let's go to the second home visit, and that is the one on 225. And I would like you to read that activity date, created by, and narrative also.
It's created by Patricia Kraft.
Okay?
Caseworker completed ongoing monthly visit. Dylan appeared clean and appropriately dressed. No placement concerns, no medical concerns were reported. The child's basic needs are being met by parents. No physical hazards were viewed in or around the home at the time of visit. Supervision and discipline appear age appropriate. The parents ensure that all scheduled appointments are kept. Interaction between the parents and the child are positive and supportive. While assessing the child's safety, well-being, and the appropriateness of placement, caseworker determined that vulnerability for CA and N is low. There is no status changes reported for the family. Daniel stated that Dylan went to the doctor on Thursday. He weighs 8 pounds, 9 ounces, and is 22 inches long. Daniel stated the baby sleeps at 6 hours at a time. Dylan has own bed and bedding.
Okay. So you viewed a crib, but just not this one?
Not that one.
Okay, all right. Also like you to read the 328 home visit.
Created by Patricia Kraft. Caseworker completed ongoing home visit. Dylan was taken in bottle when caseworker arrived. Dylan appeared clean and appropriately dressed. No medical issues were reported. No placement concerns were reported. The child's basic needs are being met by the parents. No physical hazards were viewed in or around the home at the time of visit. Supervision and discipline appear age appropriate. The parents ensure all medical appointments are kept. Interaction between parents and children are positive and supportive. It was discussed if there was a possibility that Jessica could come back home. Jessica stated she is missing the bonding with Dylan. Caseworker informed both parents that caseworker would staff with Lisa Thomas, and caseworker will call them later on to them today with an answer. Caseworker informed both they need to be at the hearing on April the 3rd, 2019. Caseworker staffed with Lisa Thomas about the possibility of Jessica going back home to bond with Dylan. It was agreed that a safety plan would be put in place, and it would state that Jessica would attend all drug court days, counseling, Mahajan for treatment, contact caseworker weekly upon dates. If Jessica has one positive drug screen or does not attend drug court, counseling both individual and group, this is a possibility both children will be removed.
So is your supervisor telling you that Jessica can come back home?
If there's a safety plan put in.
Was there a safety plan put?
They never called me back.
Okay.
I had text them to call me.
That's fine. That's fine. That's great. Let me step back for a moment. How many cases do you handle at this time, if you know, or now? How many cases are you handling as a caseworker for Children's Services?
31.
31. Okay. Was it at that time or now?
Now,
Okay. What was it at that time?
about 23.
23. Okay. Okay. With 23 cases, you were able to remember every detail about these cases. Like what he was wearing on each visit. You were able to remember that from your memory.
Yes.
Okay? On the 2-4 visit, you said he was wearing a long sleeve sleeper.
Mm-hmm.
No hat?
Oh,
And that Jess was holding him.
Jessica
Correct?
was holding him.
Okay? But you did not hold him.
No,
You did not pick him up.
no.
Isn't it true that you merely glanced at him?
I looked at him from sitting on the couch.
From sitting on the couch?
Yes, I'm right here and Jessica was right here.
So you came in the house, sat down on the couch, didn't view Dylan at all, and the only time you looked at him was from the couch.
When I seen Jessica with Jessica.
Okay? So you didn't even go over to him and look and take a look at him?
No,
Okay. And let me clarify this. Daniel Jr. said everything was okay at the house on the
Yes.
2-4 visit. Okay. But again, on the 2-4 visit, you didn't go in every room in the house.
no. He came in, talked to me for a few minutes and went to his bedroom.
Okay. So in these notes, you said there's no physical hazards, but you really didn't look at the entire property or the entire house to see if there were any physical hazards, did you?
We look when we come in around the house,
You didn't even look in the house.
not in every room.
Okay. On the 225 visit, you said that Dylan was wearing a long sleeve sleeper, correct?
Yes,
Okay. Again on that visit, did you just come in and sit on the couch?
yes,
Okay.
and we talked.
And you talked?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And did you observe Dylan from your seat on the couch?
Before I sat down, I looked at him from head to toe.
All right. From head to toe. So you picked him up, held him?
No, I didn't hold him.
Okay. All right. So You sort of just glanced at him, didn't you?
I looked at him.
Okay. At the 328 home visit, you didn't ask Daniel why he wasn't at court, did you?
We texted him the day before.
Okay, but your earlier
Yes.
testimony was you did not ask him at that home visit, did you?
No, I did not ask him at that home visit.
Okay. And Dylan, at that visit, was in a long sleeve sleeper.
Yes.
Okay. Again, did you just walk in and have a seat on the couch?
At first, but before I left, I got up, walked over, looked at him. I made two statements. I wonder if he's going to have natural curly hair like his dad and brother. He has the prettiest blue eyes for a baby. And I touched the bottom of his foot and he grinned.
Patricia Kraft, you know that's not a true statement, that you did none of that, that you merely glanced at Dylan and did not actually observe him, did you?
Objection sustained. Rephrase your question. Make the question not a statement, Mr. Shredder.
I think it's curious that you make the statement that you heard him make no sounds, no crying noises or anything, did you?
Not while I was visiting.
Okay. You mentioned that he was taking a bottle when you got there, and that at some point he stopped.
She was burping him.
She was burping him? Okay.
Make sure you answer out loud. We're making work here.
Mrs. Kraft, do you think you did your job to the best of your ability?
Yes, I did it within the law. The only thing I didn't do was bust the door down to find that baby.
One second, Your Honor. Mrs. Kraft, I would like you to read case note dated 5/2, and it begins with caseworker staffed with Supervisor Lisa Thomas. Page 38 of 46, but their page numbers are different. Again, activity date, created by, and then once you read the narrative.
The activity date was 5/2/19. It was created by me, myself. It stated, caseworker staff with Supervisor Lisa Thomas about Daniel not showing up to court. Caseworker asked supervisor about an Amber Alert and supervisor informed to go to the staff attorney, Dave Huddleston. Caseworker staff with Dave and he informed it would be a supervisor or a Director Fuller decision. Caseworker went back into the supervisor's office and informed her what the attorney said, and supervisor stated that if an Amber Alert goes out, it would give a bad reputation for the agency because we lost a child.
And you think you did your job to your best absolute ability, correct?
Yes.
But your supervisor just said this. Did you report this to anybody?
Yes.
Who did you report it to?
I went downstairs and I was crying, talking to another supervisor, and she was going to call Dr. Fuller.
Okay, but did you report it to Dr. Fuller yourself?
Dr. Fuller was not there at that
Okay.
time.
Did you report it to Dr. Fuller the next time you saw Dr. Fuller?
We discussed it.
You discussed it.
Yeah.
Again, what was the results of that discussion?
On May the 3rd, me and a caseworker was out at lunch. The other caseworker got a text and told us to go to the sheriff's office and put out an Amber Alert.
Okay. No further questions, Your Honor.
Mr. Stratton, Ms. Scott, and we'll cross-examine the witness.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Good morning, Ms. Kraft. When the father was drug screened at the hospital on January the 11th of 2019, were you present?
No.
Okay. That was conducted by Investigator Johnson, is that
Yes.
correct? Is there an actual note in the activity log that explains the protocol in which she conducted that drug screen?
There's a log created on January the 11th stating that caseworker Lauren Johnson met with Daniel in order for him to drug screen for caseworker. Daniel tested negative for all substance, therefore caseworker Johnson continued with the safety plan.
Do you know if Mr. Groves would have been aware at that time that he was going to be drug screened at that particular time?
No.
Okay. That is not documented by investigator or caseworker Johnson, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Have you conducted a drug screen yourself at a place outside of the agency?
No.
Do you know if there is a separate protocol in regards to conducting a drug screen outside the agency?
If they are doing a removal and it's going to kinship, they usually do it at the home of where the child or children are going to be placed at.
Okay. Well, that was not the situation in this case, correct?
Correct.
This was going to be conducted on the premises of, I believe, Southern Ohio Medical Center, correct?
Lauren's, I do not know where Lauren had tested Mr. Groves at.
It is not documented.
No, it just said she had contacted him.
Okay. So there's no specific documentation other than it was a negative drug screen.
Correct.
There's nothing to indicate that she violated any other protocol.
Correct.
There is nothing to indicate that someone else was present with him in the restroom at the time he gave a urine sample.
Correct.
There is no indication that that was conducted improperly.
Correct.
Do you carry your own drug screen kits on you when you anticipate drug screening someone outside of the agency?
Yes.
And are those drug screens temperature sensitive?
Yes.
And would that have been the type of drug screen that Lauren Johnson would have given Mr. Groves?
Yes.
Okay. So in order for it to be properly read as a negative drug screen, it would have had to have the appropriate body temperature reflected on the test, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Nothing to indicate otherwise because it is listed as a negative drug screen, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Have you ever known, since working with investigator caseworker Johnson, that she would conduct drug screens outside of the protocol of the agency?
Could you rephrase that again? I didn't
Yes.
hear you.
Do you know if she has ever violated policy when conducting drug screens, or are you all trained on how to do that and you do it the same way each and every time?
I have no information on her if
Okay.
she misled the protocol.
Okay, so you would have no reason to have any other knowledge otherwise that she conducted this properly?
Right, I do not.
Okay, thank you. And that's the way it was documented in the activity log, is it was a completely negative drug screen?
Correct.
Thank you.
It was also part of your testimony yesterday, I believe, that there is also documentation by, is it easier to refer to her by investigator or caseworker Johnson? Is she both?
Either one's.
Okay,
Either one is fine.
she's both. Correct.
Yes.
She holds both of those titles?
Yes.
Okay, just so I don't have to say both, just for efficiency's sake. Caseworker Johnson also noted that Mr. Groves explained to her that he was unaware of Jessica Groves' drug usage until essentially she was ready to give birth, correct?
Correct.
Okay. In this incident, you also made a referral to Help Me Grow.
Correct.
Was that a mandated program that they had to participate in?
When a child is in our custody, they have to follow their recommendations.
Okay.
So if Help Me Grow said that Dylan needed to be in their program, then they would have to follow through with that program.
Right. But there was no such recommendation made because there was no finalization of any of the
They
reports?
right, there's no recommendation because they had no contact with them.
Okay, thank you. When was the drug screen made of Daniel Groves at the agency prior to Dylan being placed in his care? Do you have that exact date? Was that on January 28th or the Friday before that?
Friday before that,
Okay. Is that,
the 25th, I believe.
okay, January 25th.
January the 25th.
Okay. Did Mr. Groves know he was coming in for a drug screen?
No.
So that was a surprise
Yes.
upon his arrival.
Yes.
Are you sure you are the one that actually conducted that drug screen, or was it Supervisor Thomas that by chance conducted that drug screen?
I conducted that drug screen.
Okay. So it was an unannounced drug screen, correct?
Yes.
So he would have no knowledge of making preparation for that?
Objection, speculation.
Just say,
Okay. I'll rephrase my question, Your Honor. Thank you. There was absolutely no conversation about him taking a drug screen at the agency prior to that, him being requested to do that when he arrived, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. And the protocol that you discussed earlier in your testimony, is that the protocol you would have followed when conducting this drug screen?
Correct.
That is correct?
What I done was, he came in the office, I gave him the cup, he showed him where the restroom was. I stood out behind the door, told him do not flush the toilet or run the water.
Okay. And also, once again, was there a temperature gauge on that sample cup?
Yes.
Did it match the appropriate body temperature that it should have shown for an appropriate sample being
Yes.
retrieved? And once again, it was a negative drug screen, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So on January the 10th, or January the 11th, I'm sorry, there was a negative drug screen by Mr. Groves.
Correct.
There was also one on January the 25th
Correct.
of Mr. Groves, correct?
Correct.
And are you aware, I'm sorry, strike that, Your Honor. Was Mr. Groves also required to go to Mahajan Therapeutics for an intake, as well as Jessica Groves?
I was unaware if he was referred through the investigator,
Okay. So
because
do
she
you,
would have set that up.
okay. I was just wondering if you were of any other drug screens that would have occurred between January 11th, or I'm sorry, January the 11th and January 25th?
I'm unaware of that.
Okay. As part of your agency's discussion regarding placing the child with the parent, and in this case, Mr. Groves. Some of the things that you would have ascertained was whether or not they had previous involvement with the agency, correct?
Correct.
And that was a negative
That was
in
a
this
negative.
situation. And that there was no violent background,
Correct.
correct? And that was a negative in this situation,
Yes.
correct? And that Mr. Groves had at least 2 agency-conducted drug screens, correct?
Correct.
And both of those were negative,
Yes.
and they were approximately 2 weeks apart, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So all of those things cleared him for placement of the child on January the 28th.
Correct.
Okay. He cooperated with you acquiring all of that information.
Correct.
He gave you any releases, appropriate information to look up those things, look up those items.
He was instructed to sign all releases.
Okay. So he cooperated in that regard, correct?
Correct.
He allowed you to look into his life,
Correct.
look into his background,
Correct.
look into whether or not he had prior cases,
Correct.
look into whether or not he had a criminal record or a violent criminal record, correct? Okay? And all of those came back as a negative,
Correct.
including the 2 drug screens.
Including the 2 drug screens.
Great, okay. And you, I believe, stated in your testimony that Investigator Johnson would have been the one that had already gone out and cleared the home.
Correct.
Do you know if there is an activity log or a note as to that?
I did not see one that she went out there.
But that would have been the agency's protocol,
Yes.
and there would not have been the suggestion or the recommendation that the child be placed in his care if his home was not qualified.
Correct.
Okay. So we can make an assumption that since she made that recommendation to her supervisor, that his home must have qualified.
Correct.
Okay.
You object for the speculatory nature.
Thank you, Ron.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay. When you made your personal visits there at the home, although you did not go through the entire residence, you did not have anything glaring or striking at you that there was anything appropriate about the home.
Everything was fine from what I've seen.
Okay, great. The note that was placed into the activity log about Mrs. Groves being loopy on a visit, which was indicating an indication that she may have been under the influence of a substance, did not involve Mr. Groves, correct?
Correct.
Okay. There was no indication from the foster parent that she made that same observation about my client, Mr. Groves, correct?
Correct.
Okay. When you had interaction with him on that first, do you call it a team meeting?
Family team meeting?
Team meeting.
Yes.
Okay, just making sure I got the correct wording. Did you observe anything about Mr. Groves that was inappropriate?
No.
Okay. Did you observe anything about him that would cause you concern when the recommendation was made that the child be placed with him that would have given you pause for cause?
No.
Thank you. And you did conduct a home visit on February the 4th, which was close to your 7-day home
Correct.
visit because there was some weather-related issues, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And everyone was present and you saw them on that day because Daniel Jr. arrived at a later time, correct?
Correct.
Okay. All appeared appropriate with the family.
Yes.
You did not note any exceptions.
None at all.
You did not have concern to where you came back and staffed and said, hey, we need to take the child back out of the home at this time.
Correct.
You did not note, I believe, in your activity log about what the child was actually wearing that day. That is testimony from personal memory, correct?
Correct.
And that's memory from a year ago, correct?
Correct.
Or approximately a year ago. We're not in February yet. And I believe it's also your testimony that you did not actually touch baby Dylan
Correct.
or manipulate him in any fashion.
No.
And the baby was being held by Jessica Groves, correct?
Correct.
Was she cradling him up front
Yeah, she would
across her
cradle
body?
him like this.
Okay. And so not the entire, there were not large portions of his body visible to you, correct?
Correct.
And if she was cradling him to where his head would be resting against her arm, the back of his head would not be exposed, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Probably close to the forehead forward,
Yeah. Yes.
okay? So whether he was wearing a hat or not, you did not see the majority of his head.
I did not see a hat on him.
Okay. But whether he was wearing a hat or not, you did not see the majority of his head.
Correct.
Okay? You did not see the back portion of his head,
No.
and you probably did not see a very great portion from the top of the head backwards, correct?
Correct.
Because the baby was resting in her arms.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. You did not see his arms exposed to you?
Just his hands.
His hands?
Yeah.
Okay. You did not see his chest exposed to you?
He was in a sleeper.
Okay. It's not a trick question. You did not see his legs exposed to you?
No.
Nowhere really other than his
Face and his hands.
hands, maybe his ears, and a portion of his forehead area, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Did you conduct any drug screens on the parents at their home that day?
No.
Did you conduct any type of drug screens on either one of the children that day?
No.
Okay. I believe in your direct testimony, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I thought you stated that the child did not make it to his doctor's appointment in early February. Can you please correct me if I'm wrong? I don't want to misspeak for you, but that is the note that I made, is that you stated that the baby missed his doctor's appointment, I believe would have been scheduled on February the 7th at Christ Care Pediatrics. And I don't know if that was a discussion that you had on February the 21st, or if that was something that you was testifying from memory.
February 25th, the parents ensure that all scheduled appointments are kept.
Okay. Okay. So if I heard you say that the baby didn't make it to his doctor's appointment around February the 7th, that may have been something I misheard.
I don't have no knowledge of him
Okay.
at the doctor
Do
on
you-
the 7th.
Okay, do you know, so you do not know if he actually had a doctor's appointment on February the 7th and all was well?
Not till Christ Care had sent me all the paperwork.
And then you were aware
That he had one,
did have an
yes.
appointment? Okay, so if I wrote that down, then I wrote that down incorrectly, just to make for sure. I just want to make sure that is not your testimony today, that he did not attend his doctor's appointment on February the 7th.
The one on the 21st, they was ordered to take Dylan to the doctor, to the hospital for some lab work at that day.
Okay. He also attended on February the 21st
Right.
as well, but what about on February the 7th? Are you aware that
I
he
was
went?
unaware until the 1st. of May, when I got the paperwork that he did have an appointment on the 1st.
So you
on the
are
7th.
acknowledging here today, sorry, didn't mean to cut you off. You're acknowledging here today that he attended a well child visit on February the 7th, as well as on February the 21st, correct?
Yes, but they did not take the test on the 7th.
Okay, but he did attend that doctor's appointment.
Correct.
Okay. Are you referring to some personal notes or a different set of notes?
I'm just reading the thing that the doctor had faxed us.
Okay, I just want to make sure what you were using for the
It's-
record to
yeah, it's
reflect your
past care.
recollection. Okay,
Yeah, and it states that they made the appointment, first visit with us on February the 7th.
Okay.
That was his first visit.
okay. And that was a well child visit,
Yes.
and the baby appeared fine? Or does it?
It doesn't say.
Doesn't
Just-
say that, okay. But there's nothing saying there was anything wrong?
Correct,
Nothing was reported to the agency that anything was wrong?
correct.
And if the pediatrician had noted something being wrong with the child, they would have more than likely contacted the agency, like they did later on in May?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. You talked a little bit with Mr. Tiemann, I believe, in regards to how bad the phone reception and the telephone service was out at the Mount Hope Road address in Otway, correct?
Correct.
And did the Groves have an actual old school landline?
No.
Did they rely on cell phones for communication?
Yes.
Did they have access to the internet, if you were aware?
I was not aware of that.
Okay, so you do not know if their phone lines would have been enhanced by the use of the internet?
Correct.
Okay, and is it your testimony that you do know that they had sketchy or spotty cell phone service on occasion?
On occasion, and I actually had to use my cell phone out there. On February the 4th, when I went there, I tore my car completely up. So I was trying to get a hold of the towing company, and I had to walk around trying to find service.
So you personally have actual experience with having terrible phone reception out there?
Correct.
So you had to kind of walk and hold your hand up and
Yes.
hold your leg up and your arm up and try to capture a signal, correct?
Correct.
So if you made multiple attempts to call them or text them, that's not unusual that either that may not have gone through or may not have been received because of the bad reception, correct?
Mr. Grove says if he laid it in a certain part of the window where he would lay it, he would always get the messages.
But you don't know if he always laid it
I
there
do
or
not
not?
know that.
Okay, so it was not striking to you that there wasn't always an immediate return phone call,
Correct.
correct? Okay, thank you. Then again, on February the 25th, you did complete a separate home visit, correct?
Correct.
And that all appeared well,
Yes.
no concerns?
No concerns at all.
Once again, I believe that it was reported that all was going well, and nothing jumped out at you in regards to a need to remove the child at that time, correct?
Correct.
Okay. You did not report any injuries,
Correct.
did not note any injuries.
Correct.
What do you recall of where the child was at that time, who was holding him, who was not holding him?
Jessica was always holding him when I'd go out there.
Okay. So if Jessica was once again holding him, would she have been holding him in the cradling position as we discussed earlier?
Correct. And then she put him on her shoulder.
Okay. And, but do you know if that is what occurred when you were there on February the 25th?
Other than her cradling. That was the only thing that I seen her do.
You only recall her actually cradling
Cradling,
him in her arms, where he would be laying on his back, his head resting in the crook of her arm, essentially.
And she would kiss him.
Okay. And she would show affection to him. Okay. Did Mr. Grove show an appropriate concern or affection for Dylan when you were there?
Yeah, because every time I had asked a question, he would answer it.
Okay. He seemed appropriately concerned.
Yes,
He gave appropriate responses.
yes,
Did he appear as if he was under the influence of anything?
no,
And once again, I believe that your testimony is that he was wearing some type of garment that covered up most of his body,
correct,
not wearing a hat.
No.
But once again, not to beat a dead horse, but most of his head was not actually visible to you,
Correct.
Once similar to the same questions I asked you before, basically his hands, his face, and a little bit of his forehead was exposed to you visibly, correct?
correct,
Okay. Midline from the back of his head not exposed to you?
correct,
Okay, thank you. There was some issue made about him Mr. Groves not attending court on February the 27th of 2019 at juvenile court.
it'd be March the 27th.
I'm sorry, March the 27th. I apologize for misstating that month. While at court, was there contact made with Mr. Groves, either through court personnel or through his attorney?
Yes,
Okay, and so he was available through either a text message or a phone call during that period of
after a
time?
little bit.
After it?
Yeah, he finally returned.
But he was reached?
Yes,
Okay, and at that point in time, you scheduled your March 28th home visit, correct? Okay. And as you stated before in your testimony, it's not unusual sometimes for folks not to show up for court in the court. Does the court make a big deal out of it if attorneys are able to reach their clients by phone as long as there's an agreement?
as long as there was an agreement.
Okay, and as long as there's not testimony that's actually going to be taken on the record, parents sometimes are able to agree with their attorneys while they're on the phone.
Correct,
And that's what happened on that March 27th day.
correct,
And so there was not really a big deal made out of it, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And that's not atypical for those proceedings in juvenile court?
no,
Okay. And once again, on March the 28th, for that visit, there were no notes of concern for you?
correct,
Nothing appearing out of the ordinary?
nothing,
Once again, you testified that that the baby was wearing a sleeper?
correct,
Once again, you noted in your testimony that Jessica Groves was holding the child?
feeding when I
Oh,
arrived.
I'm sorry, feeding the child. And so was the child it wasn't old enough to sit in a high chair?
Correct,
Okay. So how was she feeding the child? Was she holding the child and giving him a bottle?
yes, holding the child and giving him the bottle.
Okay, so once again, was she cradling him in her arms, had him in her lap, had him on a boppy pillow? What was going on?
Cradling him.
Cradling him. Once again, his head was resting in the crook of his arm, her arm, I'm sorry,
Correct,
and the majority of his head would not have been exposed.
correct,
She was feeding him,
yes,
showing him appropriate attention at that time.
yes,
Did Mr. Groves answer your questions and respond to the conversation appropriately?
yes,
Did he seem to have appropriate concern for his child?
yes,
Okay. And although you were asked about whether or not there was an injury to his head, you did not see the entire portion of his head, correct?
correct,
And that is true for all of the 3 home visits and face-to-face contacts you had with this child. You did not see the majority of the portion of his head.
correct,
Thank you. Then we get into a pattern and a practice of Mr. Groves and Mrs. Groves avoiding you.
Correct.
You never had face-to-face contact, really, with either one of them after that point, correct?
Correct.
Okay. People that start avoiding the agency raises suspicions, correct?
Correct.
No one else that you talked to had ever seen the child again after March 28th, correct?
Correct.
You talked to friends, families, neighbors, as many folks that you all could reach out to, correct?
Correct.
No one saw this child after March 28th, correct?
Correct.
Not that you were able to ever ascertain, correct?
Correct.
I know this is very upsetting for you, as well as it is for all of us. But we don't know what happened after March 28th, do we?
No.
They were avoiding you.
Yes.
They were avoiding their own family.
Yes.
They never really came forward to try to get Daniel Jr. back, did they?
No.
Other than the text message, hey, what's going on?
That was it.
Mr. Groves did exhibit concern about Daniel Jr.'s welfare and asked where he was at, correct?
Correct.
He did play somewhat of a game with you and kept telling you that he was going to produce the baby, correct?
Correct.
He never did he?
No.
Did you suspect at that time that the child was not alive?
Yes.
That would be the only reason why he wouldn't produce the child, correct?
Correct.
Did you notice or observe an unusual relationship between Jessica Groves and Daniel Groves when you were in their presence?
No.
Did you observe a loving relationship between the two of them?
Yes, they was very supportive of each other.
They were bonded to each other, correct?
Correct.
Would you say that's an accurate observation?
Yes.
They'd been together for a long time,
20
from
years.
your understanding?
Yeah.
20 plus years?
Correct.
Did you ever observe, while you were asking questions of maybe Mr. Groves, that he would look to Mrs. Groves before he answered or gave you any answers?
I never noticed.
Okay. Okay. But at that time, everything was all okay, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And on the occasions, just to be clear, and I believe that you've already testified to this, you did not pick up or manipulate the baby in any form or fashion other than tickling his foot on that one occasion, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Your Honor, may I have a conversation with Mr. Kraft? Ms. Kraft, after that 3/28 day, you never had a face-to-face again with either one of the Groves, the parents, Jessica or Daniel.
Correct,
You never saw Dylan again.
correct,
You only saw Daniel Jr.,
correct,
and he also kind of fell out of contact with his parents as well, correct?
correct.
Okay. Thank you, that's all I have this time.
Scott, you redirect.
No, Your Honor.
Any other questions for this witness?
No, Your Honor. No, Your Honor.
Not at this time, Your Honor, thank you.
Is she excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, she would be excused for our purposes.
Okay, you're free to go. Ladies and gentlemen, it's now time for our lunch recess. I'm going to ask, probably notice the clock in the courtroom is a little slower than the one that's up there on the screen. The one on the screen, I believe, is a little more accurate. I'm going to ask that you be back in the jury room at 25 minutes after 1. During the lunch recess, I'm going to conduct some other hearings on some other cases and would ask counsel to be back here at the same time. It'd be my intention to be in the courtroom at 1:30 to start the afternoon session of testimony. Remember my earlier admonition to you, do not discuss this case amongst yourselves, do not discuss it with anyone else, do not permit anyone to discuss it with you or in your presence. It is your duty not to form or express an opinion on this case until it is finally submitted to you. This time, I'll see you in about an hour.